thing, I guess. We wanted to welcome our new commissioner, Matt Smith. And Matt, would you like to just give us a short of you?
Short of me?
Yes.
Nashville native. I'm a local home builder with Howard & Smith Contractors. Like I said, been here my whole life. Married, have a 2.5-year-old daughter, and live in the Green Hills area. And excited to try to help out. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for willing to be in public service. So hope you have fun. Pursuant to the provision of Section 2.68.030 of the Metropolitan Code of Laws, notice is hereby given that a final hearing before this commission is appealable to the Chancery Court of Davidson County or the Circuit Court of Davidson County. This is statutory writ of certiorari. You are advised to seek your own independent legal counsel to ensure that your appeal is filed in a timely manner and that all procedural requirements are met. You should also seek independent legal advice regarding the applicability of the writ of certiorari to the specific decision of the Historic Zoning Commission. There's one thing that we have added into our script as well is the preservation permit. Some of you may have been here in the past and some of you are new, so it would be good just to have a little bit of a review. So if you are approved for a preservation permit today and you are not the contractor, please know that it is your responsibility to make sure that the contractor has a copy of the preservation permit before beginning work. The preservation permit includes items that require final approval and inspection requirements. The final drawings are a part of the preservation permit. Following the preservation permit will save you time and money, as enforcement of violations can sometimes be a lengthy and expensive process for all of us. The preservation permit is not a building permit. No work can begin without the appropriate review and approval by the Metropolitan Department of Codes Administration. Also, another just reminder that when you come up to speak, make sure that that red little button is going to be on because you are in public record. And if you are, or as the applicant, or if you are the applicant, please identify yourself and your connection to the project, like if you're the architect or the contractor or designer. Also, when speaking during public hearing, again, identify yourself and connection to the specific project. Thank you. Vice Chair is here. Okay, first thing on our agenda is adoption of the January 17, 2024 minutes. Is there a motion?
Motion to adopt.
There's a motion.
Second.
A second by Commissioner Price. All in favor of the motion? Aye. Seeing none opposed, we are passing that motion. Adoption of the agenda. Ms. Ziegler, do we have any changes?
We do have some requested changes. One is to remove 908 Gilmore because the notification requirements were not met. Another is to remove 3749 Woodland Avenue because they revised their project for an administrative permit. And 405 South 17th also did not meet the notification requirements. So that's cases 9, 12, and 24.
Thank you. Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the adoption of the agenda with its revisions?
So moved.
Vice Chair?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cotton. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Are any of our council members here today? Okay. Thank you again for their service as well. All right. I think staff will have our consent agenda.
All right. Items on the consent agenda will be voted on at a single time. No individual public hearing will be held, nor will the commission debate these items unless a member of the public or the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda. If there is a case on the consent agenda that you are in opposition to, please raise your hand when the item is called. Cases pulled from the consent agenda will be heard at the end of the agenda. Again, please raise your hand if you are in opposition to any of the following cases. So first, we have administrative permits issued for the prior month. 519 Fatherland Street, new construction of an addition with a setback determination. 124 South 17th Street, new construction of an addition. 1416 Eastland Avenue, new construction of an outbuilding. 2101 Grantland Avenue, new construction of an addition and an outbuilding. 130 Blackburn, new construction of an outbuilding with a setback determination. And 319 Lauderdale Road, new construction of an addition with setback determination and partial demolition of an outbuilding. So I'll just read through those again. If anyone is in opposition, please raise your hand. So 519 Fatherland Street, 124 South 17th Street, 1416 Eastland Avenue, 2101 Grantland Avenue, 130 Blackburn, and 319 Lauderdale Road. So those are the items proposed to be voted on all at once. Staff recommends approval of the items on the consent agenda with the applicable conditions, finding the applications to meet the design guidelines of their respective overlays.
Thank you, Melissa. Anyone have any questions?
No questions, just again to restate, if you showed up and you have a question or anything about any of these cases that were just called, and you wait till the end of the meeting, that these are passed and we're moving on. So we've had some folks that's happened to, and we want to say it in 10 different ways so that you don't stick around for 2 hours and wonder when your opportunity was. So speak now, or
forever hold
further
your
opportunity.
peace. Or forever hold your peace. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay. Do we have a motion to vote the consent agenda with its changes?
So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Price and Commissioner Cotton. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you.
Chair, may I ask a question real quick? Robin, our screens down here are not working. If we could have IT maybe take a look. Thank you.
All right, before we move into the hearing portion of the meeting, this is just a reminder about how the hearing process works. First of all, staff will present a summary of the project and a recommendation. After staff presentation, the applicant, including all members of their team and any supporters, may present for up to 10 minutes. They may reserve up to 2 of those 10 minutes for rebuttal of public comment, if there is public comment. And the commission may grant the 2 minutes of rebuttal if the time remains from the original 10 minutes. After the applicant presents, there's time for public comment. Each member of the public has up to 2 minutes to speak, although groups such as neighborhood groups may speak for up to 5 minutes if they ask to do so prior to the meeting. The commission may ask follow-up questions of any presenter or member of the public during their presentation or at the end of it, as well as during their own deliberations. The response time for these questions do not count against the time allotments. Once a public hearing is closed, applicants and members of the public cannot initiate exchanges during the deliberation period without an invitation from the commission to speak. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Ann. Okay. First on the agenda.
3806 Central, and this is a rehearing of a violation where the applicant proposes solutions to the 2 issues that were a violation. The project was an outbuilding, and it was constructed approximately 2 feet taller than what the design guidelines allow for, and the eave heights were constructed taller than what the guidelines allow for. So they now propose to extend the eaves so that they meet the design guidelines and to clip the gables to lessen the visual impact of the ridge that is too tall. As otherwise, the entirety of the roof would have to be replaced and the building which is completely finished, including the interior. Staff recommends approval, and the contractor for the project is here to provide you with more information.
Thank you, Robin. Applicant? Is the applicant here? 3806 Central Avenue?
I was told the contractor would be here, so I don't know. I know there's people from the neighborhood ready to
Right.
speak, but
So this is a rehearing. So I want to make sure that the applicant has opportunity. Are you part of the applicant? Okay, then you would be the one. So please come forward and identify yourself, and also, again, you've mentioned it, but we haven't heard you on that mic there. Please turn the mic on. As long as it's red, there you go.
My name is John Broderick with Broderick Builders. I'm a remodeling contractor, and I was hired by the homeowners, Mr. and Mrs. Rosenblum, to construct this structure. They are currently in the Netherlands on business for a year.
Okay, do you have any other comments concerning the revisions that you're presenting to us?
Well, it's been submitted to the staff. I mean, there are drawings that go with it, so I'm fine with it. I mean, if it's approved, we'll make those modifications, which will satisfy all of the needs of the Historic Commission.
Our design guidelines,
Pardon me?
the design guidelines, per the
Timeline's
design
fine.
guidelines.
It's fine.
Yes, because that's our purview, so we want to make sure that's really clear, that it's not just because of recommendation,
Right.
but also because it is for the design guidelines.
That'll be fine.
Okay, thank you. We may have some more questions for you, so stand by.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, open public hearing. And if there's a few of you, and if you are also part of any kind of a neighborhood association, please identify yourself as well. And just be sure to come up, because we do have a long meeting, so if you do, just stand by quickly. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jim Kelly, and I'm here on behalf of the Richland West End Neighborhood Association. We have submitted a written statement in opposition to the staff recommendations. I would say that I've been a resident in the neighborhood for over 30 years. We were one of the first neighborhoods to get an overlay, and it's worked great with a few hiccups. We've had new construction, we've had remodels, and our neighborhood has kept its character, and it's a really great place to live. Interestingly, almost all of the problems we've had have been folks who have built buildings bigger than the permit. Too high, too wide, too deep, too whatever. And that's the reason we usually end up down here, is because we have the guidelines, which have worked very well and which folks have followed, but then we have occasional instances where there's a violation. Sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's just negligence, but there are violations. The problem with this structure is the same problem that we've had with multiple others. It's too tall. What makes this particularly, I guess, troublesome for us is that about 6-8 months ago, a similar problem came up in the 3700 block of Central. In fact, it's kitty corner across the alley from where I live. It's one of my neighbors. Same thing, he built the garage too tall, but the remedy there was take the roof down, which he did. He wasn't happy. He probably will never be quite as friendly towards his neighbors as a result of that, but it did get remedied. And now we have effectively, just a few months later, the same problem, and it's the same violation. The ridge line's too high. But now the remedy is to not lower the ridge line so that it complies with the guidelines and all the other structures in the neighborhood. The remedy is to make basically some fool the eye adjustments by lowering the ends. You look at it and you won't think it's as tall, but it still is. And here's the problem that we really have with the recommendation. It says that this does not set a precedent for future future outbuildings to be taller than what the guidelines allow. Well, I'm a lawyer, although I'm working harder now to be a grandfather than a lawyer. But when I read that, I thought, gee, you show that to a judge and they're going to laugh at you. No offense to the staff. You all have a dilemma now. 6 months ago, you made a person a block away take the garage height down. You have the same violation today, and you're saying you don't have to do it. Now, while the staff may say this doesn't set a precedent, let's assume in 6 months we have yet another garage built too tall. And that person comes in, and today if you say you don't have to lower it, what are you going to tell that person? You do have to lower it? And they say, well, wait a minute, just 6 months ago you told this group that they didn't have to. Well, if I'm the third person, I appeal to Chancery Court, and I would think it's close to a slam dunk win on appeal, that you're being arbitrary and capricious because you have rules, they apply to some people, and the same rules don't apply to the other people. You need to think about that very carefully, and that's what bothers us. If we're going to have rules, we need to have rules. If we're not going to have rules, then, why are we going through this whole process? Why do you exist? Why do people get permits? Why do you have inspections? So then you build it too high and it doesn't matter. You get a free pass anyway. And that's what worries us. We've been at it for more than 25 years and it's worked really well and we want to keep it working well. The last thing I would say is, lawyers have this saying that say, bad facts or hard facts make bad law. And usually that comes up in the context of, I'm going to use a bad example, but, a disabled person's in a coma and they get the notice that their house is going to be sold for taxes, but they couldn't, they didn't open the mail because they were in a coma and they lose their house. Well, those are hard facts and you get a bad result. But what happens then is people look for exceptions to justify why the rules didn't apply. And I read through the submissions, I listened to the applicant's representative, and there are no excuses. They just built it too high. And you should not make an exception and come to a bad result for no reason. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kelly. Please come forward, those of other public comment. And other than the neighborhood association, you have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon. My name is Michael Linseth, and I'm at 3533 Richland Avenue, and I'm been the president of the neighborhood association the last 8 years. And just want to reiterate kind of what Jim just said, as well as, per what I have read, the contractor or the owner is supposed to contact historical zoning to be sure the height and everything is where it needs to be. And that was not done. And that's what's frustrating, that this could have been prevented if the rules were followed. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Okay. If no one else is, yes, you do have some minutes for rebuttal. Yes.
John Broderick with Broderick Builders again. Just a couple of notes. This was not an intentional height that was implied a little bit earlier. He said it could have been intentional or it could have been accidental. It was accidental. I don't know about the situation in the other job he referred to, so I can't speak to it, but I don't know if they actually presented an option to the board other than reducing the ridge line. I don't know if that ridge line was higher than the existing house on the property, whereas this ridge line is not higher than the original house that's on the property. They're not apples and apples. I think it should be taken on a case-by-case basis instead of a blanket, decision all the way across, because they're just different circumstances with different houses. We have proposed something through the architect to the Historic Commission that would bring the concept or the visual appearance of the ridge line to be below what's accepted. And this is the proposal that's out there. And if it's accepted by the historic zoning, I would like to think that the neighborhood association has some input. But I'd also like to think, maybe there's not today, but there's supposed to be 2 or 3 of the neighbors who actually live right beside this particular property. And they've looked at the property. They don't have any concerns about it at all. The ridge line of this garage is exactly the same as the ridge line on the garage exactly right beside it, which is also a new construction. They were finished at the same time. So it's odd that on on this lot it can be this high, and on this lot it needs to be a little bit lower. That's irrelevant to me too, but the point is it's not higher than the other ridge lines right beside it, and it's not higher than the ridge line in front of the house. I grew up in that neighborhood. I don't think it's ugly. Thank you.
Mr. Contractor, we may have questions for you. Did you miss public hearing?
I was here, I missed before he came back up.
Are you part of the design committee or architect? We closed public hearing already, and that's why we wanted to reiterate, if you were doing this for public hearing, you wanted to do it during the time that was allotted. We said it several times, so we have closed public hearings. That means no more public hearing. We gave you the opportunity to do that and actually held few seconds to do that. So I'm sorry, but we have closed public hearing. Okay? Since that process is the applicant has already given his 2 minutes of rebuttal, we are now in session for commissioners to discuss. Are we clear? Okay, very good. Thank you. Here we go.
Every time something like this comes up, I always scratch my head and I say, how did this happen? And I have a question for staff. It appears as though there were no inspections called in after foundation and framing. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so they did not contact you for framing inspection or foundation inspection. At that point, this would have been picked up. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay.
Not foundation, but it certainly would have with the framing
Picked up with
inspection.
framing. Yeah. Okay, great.
I've got a question for Mr. Broderick. Could you come up, please, Mr. Broderick? I've heard your name before, and I think you've been in this business for a long time, have you not?
45 years.
Yeah, and so can you tell me, 'cause surely you've worked in areas that have historic zoning overlays. Could
Yes,
you
ma'am.
tell me how this accident happened?
Beg your pardon?
Could you tell me how this happened?
The framing lumber that was used on the project in order to create a clear span in the garage could not be a 2x10, which is the way the architect drew it, with a 2x10 joist going all the way across the garage. I believe it's 20-something feet by 30-something feet. We obviously ran the joist 20-something feet. With the new engineering codes that are out today, that had to be increased to what we call a TJI, which is an I-joist made out of wood, which was approximately 12 inches taller than the 2x10 that would have been used, which was 9.5 inches. I believe there were 21 or 22-inch TJIs. That raised the whole elevation of the structure by that amount, and it is currently 13 inches taller than what was allowed according to the Historic Commission. That pretty much accounts for the 13 inches right there. It was not anything intentional whatsoever. It was the lumber came, we had to put it together.
And
We didn't even realize it was higher until the person came out at the very end.
And could you tell me why there were not the appropriate inspections?
All of the inspections were done per Metro codes. I personally, as a contractor here for 45 years, would like to see, this is just a recommendation, that when Metro Codes is informed that there's a footing inspection, a framing inspection, or a mechanical inspection, that it automatically go to the Historic Commission too, saying that that inspection is coming up. I have never had to, on previous projects, inform the Historic Commission to come out for a framing inspection or a footing inspection. We did supply the Historic Commission with all of the selections it required, which is what we've always done in the past: shingle color, window selection, exterior door selection and color, garage door selection, for example. And it was an oversight on our part. Ironically, these are apparently some rules that are different just for day dues as opposed to additions, because at the same time we were building the garage, we were doing an addition on Princeton Avenue, and we were never asked for any of those inspections. We simply had all the normal Metro inspections. Footing, there's a layout inspection to make sure you're within the setbacks, footing inspection, framing inspection, plumbing, electrical, heating, and air conditioning, and a final. We had every one of those with Metro Codes on this project, and they were all approved.
Well, maybe Robin can enlighten us on procedure.
Pardon me?
Maybe Robin can enlighten us on proper procedure.
Sure. On the preservation permit, there are listed all the things that need an inspection or that need final approval. And that's why you make that speech at the beginning, that if you have a preservation permit and you're not the contractor, make sure it gets to the contractor. It's repeated on multiple pages of the permit, and it's a part of our website as well. It's been that way before my time, and I've been here 13 years.
And I don't disagree with that, because the selections are there. To me, again, a suggestion would be more clarity when it goes to that point, because it essentially says Metro inspections, and then it lists those other ones. It's just, that's on the printed out email that we got.
So you want more clarity than what the permit says?
Well, more clarity in the fact that a person needs to realize that when you call Metro and ask for an inspection, it doesn't necessarily go to all of Metro.
And that's why we have that information on our permit, that you need to call us as well as Codes, and it has our number and our email. But I think that's a great idea, and it is something Metro is working on, but that's probably 2 or 3 years down the line.
Take some time to put that into play, probably.
Right.
But that would be an excellent idea, because it's just, when you call into Metro for a permit, you normally are assuming, never assume anything, but you're assuming that all of Metro is going to be notified of what you're doing.
So there was a framing and foundation inspection
sir.
via Codes, just not
Yes,
via
sir.
historical?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Okay.
Give it one more second, because we may have more questions for you.
I'm not leaving.
I'll go. The staff recommendation here is asking for a compromise solution, but it still leaves in place a violation. While I generally in my life am in favor of compromise, and we compromise a lot here on this commission, when it comes to violations, we have, in my experience, a little over 5 years, tended to hew pretty closely to the words of the guidelines and have required applicants to correct violations. I can think of several in recent meetings where we were maybe presented with some compromise solutions that did not actually fully address or correct the violation, and we held to the staff recommendation for disapproval. And in this case, I appreciate the neighborhood association bringing up the very recent similar, almost identical example on the same street even, of a roof structure that we required to be reconstructed according to the plans that were permitted. I don't see really, and I acknowledge that this was an accidental mistake and not intentional. We see those a lot Most people who come before us with violations did this. It happened accidentally through a chain of events very similar to this. Miscommunications, permits not read, inspections not called in. So the problem that we're always left with is what kind of precedent we're setting, and I believe the neighborhood association representative who spoke, who's an attorney, put it pretty well in that this would weaken our position going forward if we were to hold people to the letter of the guidelines and some people to the letter and some people not. It's going to create more problems. And while this seems like a minor thing that maybe we should be able to work out, it can have cascading effects through all kinds of other cases that we're very likely to see. So as much as we all hate to see these violation cases and we see entirely too many of them for our own comfort and well-being, it's our job as commission to adhere to the guidelines as written and not give favorable recommendations or approval to some people and not others. It's important to me to be consistent. So for that reason, I'm going to lean on our earlier unanimous decision, I believe in October, to disapprove this.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Commissioner, I'll just say I agree. I am sticking with my original. I think we should stick with our original unanimous decision. Not to approve this. This was a difficult decision. In October, it was well debated. I am very concerned about the precedent this sets. And I'm a bit concerned about applicants seeking remedy through the media and not the courts, and through us, which is the appropriate place. So I think we have to stay with our original decision.
Thank you, Commissioner. I mean, you have other comments, but as chair, I also want to say this is the question is who is responsible for the mistake? It comes before us and we're not the ones who made the mistake. So this is always a very sensitive debate and argument for us. And we hear both sides, and I hear the commissioners as well. But I think the question, and I'm not answering that, but the rhetorical question is who is responsible for the mistake? And I think this is why our scripts are always very updated these days, because then, we want to be sure that the public and the applicants are very clear on who is responsible. So with that said, if there's other commissioners that want to have comment.
This is a difficult project. I hate seeing projects that get to this point and get so far down the road and then come asking for forgiveness. I just went back and looked at the preservation permit that was issued, and on the first page, there's a big red block in red letters that states what inspections are required and the phone number to call, the email to call this number if any questions arise. And then that same note appears on every sheet of the page in a smaller box, but still a significant box that's impossible to miss. I'm compelled by Mr. Kelly's argument about the precedent this would set. And so with respect to 3806 Central Avenue, I move for disapproval of this project.
Vice Chair has made a motion.
Second.
There's a second by Commissioner Cashin.
Robin will say something.
So sorry,
Okay.
can I ask for a clarification? It sounded to me like the motion is to disapprove and perhaps reaffirm the original motion. And then I thought you might want to give another range of time that it needs to be corrected, since they probably can't meet that anymore.
Sure. Okay. So I'll modify that motion to say that I recommend disapproval and reaffirmation of the prior disapproval with 120 days to correct.
Do you think that's enough time, Vice Chair?
What do you think?
They live out of town.
The current recommendation is 120 days. Do we need to?
Is that that's 120 days from this date?
From today.
Yeah.
To start or
To be complete.
I have a question for council or clarification. Is it possible for the commission to request that some progress be shown towards remedy? And in that case, if there is none, that there would be show cause for the applicant to reappear before us and describe why not and when? This is something of an open-ended and not a taking the roof off of a building, and it's not a small thing. Some portion of the roof off.
Like, are you asking if your order could sort of have built-in deadlines?
If we said in 120 days, significant progress needs to be demonstrated, and that would be from a staff inspection, not that it necessarily needs to be complete. And then if no significant progress had been made, then show cause would be required of the applicant.
And would there be a date then for completion?
6 months, I think we could
Make
come up with
180,
something.
sure. Yeah, we can make completion in 180 days.
I think that should be fine.
So let me reiterate that, Commissioner Mosley. Is you're saying if there's progress, or you're saying it's okay for the 180 days, or is it legal for us to ask that they come in 60 days and we see progress from inspection? I think staff will do their inspection. Right, Robin? So are we assured of that? I just want to be clear.
120 days is not a very long time with somebody who's out of the country and to take the roof off something and put it back on. The actual work being done, you've got to have available subcontractors and so on and so forth. So 120 days is aggressive, in my opinion, given the current market conditions.
So you're going to propose 180 days.
But I'm unwilling for it to sit for 120 days with nothing happening.
I think that's where I was going with.
Yeah.
So a show cause at 120 days. So the revision is a show cause at 120, completion by 180.
Legal.
Show progress.
Show progress.
Okay. Just want to be real clear.
A sort of a midway point deadline that you want to have staff inspect. And if there hasn't been progress made, then you would consider that a violation of the order. And then that would trigger a show cause hearing. And if not, then and if there had been progress made, then there would be an outside deadline of whatever time you allotted to complete and that would be set.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds reasonable. So do we need to amend this motion?
So I believe Commissioner Stewart made the motion. If you'd like to amend your motion, if you're agreeable to an amendment, if you want to re-articulate that.
Sure. Do you want me to restate it?
Yes, I think that would be helpful.
Okay. That'd be great. Awesome.
And then you can tell me if it's wrong. Vice Chair Stewart moved to disapprove the request and reaffirm the original decision, requiring that the violation be corrected with work starting with 120 days and completed with 180 days.
That's correct.
Is that right?
Yep.
Okay, that is the motion on the table. Is there a second? Commissioner Cashin is going to second it again. Okay, all in favor of the motion?
All right.
Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Okay, thank you. An applicant, you will need to continue your conversation with staff. Thank you. Also want to thank the neighborhood group for coming. Thank you very much.
All right, next up is 2706 Westwood Avenue. The house at 2706 Westwood Avenue is a circa 1935 contributing structure in the Hillsborough West End Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. As quick background, in March 2023, staff signed off on a building permit for interior work to the house. The scope of the work did not require review by MHCC or the issuance of a preservation permit. In October, staff discovered that the roof had been removed and an addition had been framed. This work exceeded the scope of the original permit and should have been reviewed by MHCC. The applicant was told to reconstruct the roof as quickly as possible and to submit plans for the addition for review and permitting. In January, staff noted that the work had continued on the unpermitted addition. A stop work order was issued and plans were received soon thereafter. Upon reviewing the plans, staff realized there were a few issues that needed commission review, including the side setback and the rear roof plane and eaves. Here's the site plan. The blue line there at the top indicates the 5-foot side setback. You can see the bulk of the historic house itself is over that side setback line on the left, and at the back corner, about 1 foot 6 inches from the property line. The addition has a very modest inset, which does meet the guidelines in this case, and it is about 1 foot 9 inches from the side property line. The applicant is requesting a setback determination to allow the footprint to remain as is. And you can see there where it's white, that is the original historic house. That hatched section there is the addition. And then the sort of brick-looking part, that's a courtyard that is uncovered, so that does not count as part of the footprint there. Staff finds that it could be appropriate to adjust the setback as requested for several reasons. The commission has adjusted side setbacks in the past when the addition is stepping no closer to the property line than the historic house already sits, which is the case here. Additionally, the neighbor's driveway abuts the property line on the other side, so an appropriate rhythm of spacing is maintained between the two structures. And further, the addition is only 5 feet 6 inches deep along the sidewall. Given that shallow depth, the site condition, and the retention of the existing historic setback, staff finds a proposed side setback could be appropriate. However, the rear courtyard should remain uncovered and no further construction should be permitted within that 5-foot side setback without further review from the commission. When compared to photographs taken prior to the current project, it's clear that the rear roof plane was reconstructed incorrectly. The rear eave used to land on that back corner of the house that's stone, and now it projects several feet further back. In response to staff's concern about this, the applicant submitted plans to keep the shallower roof plane, but to reintroduce the original eave line on the exterior wall. Staff finds that this is an inadequate correction, as the original roof form is not restored. Staff recommends that 1, the new rear roof plane be removed, 2, the original conditions of the rear roof plane be restored, including the original slope and the original eave, and 3, the sidewalls of all roof additions need to inset a minimum of 2 feet from the original sidewalls of the historic house. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the proposed addition and setback determination with the conditions you see here on your screen. It's a little bit complicated. I'm happy to answer any questions. I know the applicant is here as well.
I have a question for staff. If
Yep.
the rear roof, so there's a minimal setback between the stone and the clapboard.
That's right.
I assume that's clapboard addition.
That's right.
And if you move any new roof plane back 2 feet, that would imply that there's like some sort of small little roof that covers that extra.
Yeah, and you can
that's
see
there.
here they have provided
Implied
a little,
that,
yeah, they provided a little something there.
So that is what would be necessary to provide a roof over that portion of the house. In other words, if the boundary of the house is wider than we're going to require on the setback of the roof, then you got to roof that somehow, and that would be the solution. That was the question that I was
Correct. So
coming
those sidewalls could be pushed in 2 feet, or that portion could be removed entirely, and then you just got the projecting portion coming off the original slope, if that makes sense.
to. And I may have misheard. Are we wanting the second floor to be pushed back, or just the roof line in the recommendation?
So that any sidewalls at the roof should be 2 feet inset from the historic sidewall.
But the second floor, the sidewall is, what they're showing in that slight change is acceptable.
That is acceptable. Correct, because it's just one room deep.
Thanks.
And you've allowed things like that in the past. Yes. Okay, I think we're ready for the applicant, unless you have other questions for me.
Not right now, Jenny. Thank you. Applicant?
Afternoon. So with regards
Identify yourself, please.
Sorry, my name's Timothy Romero. I'm the general contractor under T Projects that started the remodel of this project. Obviously, the scope of works was only interior work. But once we started to investigate and look at the floor joist system for the attic space, that was definitely inadequate. They were 2x6s. And then also the roof line were 2x4s spanning in the vicinity of 23 to 27 inches on spans. And then the ridge line of the gable in the front wasn't even connected. So it was lucky that it was connected. So that led us to the evolving of the roof line and the need for that to be removed. Now also talking about the setback on the side of the building, the original intent, and we worked with the owners and their designer, Patrick Dunn, so he's quite well known, the designer. The original intent for them was to create, and we sourced Tennessee flint stone, and we're going to do the grapevine. So we're going to marry that same alignment of that because of the structure. When you're looking at that white bottom, white box, that laundry was lap siding that was quite deteriorated. So what we were trying to do was mimic, you see that pink space, we were trying to create that same plane and do it in the Tennessee flint. And then that's what led to that roof line, trying to match that. So we actually increased the pitch by 2 degrees. We're actually going back about 3 feet in total. And that's what softened that pitch, because that was the original intent, to recreate the Tennessee flint. So you wouldn't have seen that delineation of the old and new of that component. So that's how it evolved, and wasn't like a reckless decision, because the client and the designer have been quite involved, and they wanted to restore this project, not trying to create, siding like typical other, new modern stuff around the area. They're trying to do a nod to the historic building there. So that's what we requested, was to cut back that eave back flush with the structure, and create that faux gable to recreate that, because we're not allowed to do the Tennessee flint. We have to do siding, so it's now going to be highlighted. So our proposal was to create that flush with the building's line, and that will give us the 16 to 2 feet inset on the roof line, but we're not wanting to change the roof line per se, because we have structural engineered LVLs, and that gable catches all on that, and to recreate that would literally mean we need to pull the whole structure back. So I think if we were to cut back the eaves flush, I think what we propose, and then recreate that gable line and visible from the street, and what you can actually see, we've spoken to quite a few neighbours, it's really difficult to see that angle, and the front character of the house has been established, and we're not trying to change that at all. If anything, we've gone back. Even the shingles themselves, we used the Pabco Cascade shingle and imported that from Washington. So we've taken the time to try to recreate and almost go back to its 1935 historic timeline. So yeah, we're just asking, we're saying similar with the setbacks and the roof line, if we're able to cut it back rather than rebuild the whole structure.
A question to staff. Does the applicant have a permit right now? Has a permit been issued, a preservation permit been issued?
There has been no preservation permit issued.
Sorry?
There's no preservation permit for this project.
So just so I'm sure, just to clarify, this construction that I see in the photograph was all done without a permit, the new construction? And the permit was just for interior only?
They have a building permit for interior work,
Interior
yes,
only.
correct.
Yeah, and then the back of the building was there. We just retook it off and then restructured it because it was deteriorated with termite damage and the foundation. The whole back wall was unsafe.
Mr. Applicant, that is exactly what we're going to be asking, is how did this preservation permit did not get issued with you doing your work?
Preservation?
Yep. And it says and it says, and I'm sure some of the commissioners will say this too, and this frustrates us when there's not a preservation permit and work is done, that staff tried to reach out and there was no response from either you or the applicant. until January 2024. Can you explain that, please?
No, so there was some correspondence, but in terms of the drawing themselves and recreating that, it was a moving target with the client and their designers. So once we drew things, we had to recreate them again because they wanted things differently. And that was and there was also, other reasons, personal reasons I couldn't get to the drawings in that lengthy timeline. But I was communicating, and I did communicate that I was working on it.
Did you know that there wasn't a permit?
I knew there was a permit on the remodel, but not a preservation. No
Okay.
need for the preservation.
Did you know that it was under an overlay?
No, I did not.
And why were you not told? Why did you not look under the permits? And, we have it all documented. If there's a property under an overlay, it is on record. I'm just trying to get to the bottom line here.
Right. So when we originally looked at the original scope was a remodel and interior works permit. So the scope of that and
Only
applied-
interior.
Correct. And then when we looked at doing the work, we were replacing like for like and not increasing the footprint. So that's therefore, we were just trying to restructure and salvage the building in its entirety. So that's how we evolved. It wasn't let's go break all these rules.
Anyone else? Okay. Anything else you want to say? You have 6 minutes, and if we have rebuttal, you can come back.
No, I think we've spoken to a lot of the neighbours and, and the client and the designers' aim and their goal was to preserve it. Obviously, we didn't get a preservation and apologise for that. That was my ignorance in terms of I've typically done new construction and they're quite modern homes. So this dive into the historic is a new area. So
Is this your first project
as a
under an
historical,
overlay?
correct. I've done a lot of new construction and a lot of knockdown rebuilds in the East Nashville and Bordeaux area, but this was a little bit of a change due to the climate and getting some work from investors and stuff. So I've
Okay.
maneuvered.
Give yourself a chance to talk. So give me,
Sure.
if you're done explaining this, and this is a violation, so
Yep.
we're gonna talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Open public hearing? Okay, I'm gonna ask one more time. Open public hearing. Anybody that wants to speak on this project, please come to the podium. If not, it will get closed. Okay, thank you. So public hearing is closed. Commissioners.
I think we all see that this for what it is pretty straightforward. Work done without a permit, and I support the staff recommendation to fix it in order to proceed.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else make a motion? We'll see how that goes. Make a motion.
With respect to 2706 Westwood Avenue, I move to approve this staff recommendation with conditions.
Commissioner Price has made a motion. There's a second by Commissioner Cashin. All in favor of the motion? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Applicant, you'll continue to work with staff, please. Let me make sure do you understand where you're going now? So the commission has approved staff recommendation, which means you are in violation without a permit. Is that clear?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that means you will continue to work so that you can get a permit that is acceptable under the design guidelines. Okay, very good. Just want to make sure you understand. Thank you.
Next up is 429 Broadway. The applicant requests to enclose an open-air second level with roll-up doors. Staff recommends disapproval as roll-up doors on an upper level that is not stepped back or not consistent with the proportion and rhythm of openings seen historically. The windows or doors are not compatible with the surrounding buildings, and the relationship of width to height of windows is not visually compatible with the district. The project does not meet Section 3C1 and 3F for new construction, scale and proportion, and rhythm of openings. There's not enough information to provide a review of Section 3G for materials, and the addition does not result in the building being more compatible with the district. Therefore, the proposal does not meet Section 3I1. So staff recommends disapproval.
Thank you, Robin. Is the applicant here? Please identify yourself.
Good afternoon, Steve Meisner, Nashville Bar. I represent the ownership group RSF Investors, LLC, which includes Steve Smith, Jeff Rippey, and Hardy Ross. Those are the three principal owners of Rippey's that sits across the street from the arena. I presume everyone is familiar with the building that we're talking about. Brief history of this dispute that we've been in now for a better part of 8 years. It started with a request to put on a covering on the rooftop bar of Rippey's, which was approved. During that hearing, the attorney and the group that was here talking said we may want to put in some plastic drop-down curtains to protect the second floor during inclement weather. The return comment from the group was that, well, that's not in the plan, so if you want to do that, you need to come back. That made its way into the preservation permit, and the language in the preservation permit as it exists today states that the second floor shall not be enclosed. I'm paraphrasing. I'm sure there's exact language in the packet of material that's been provided. Since that time, we've gone back and forth trying to find a way during inclement weather to protect band equipment, plumbing. Most recently, we had a cold snap where we had 3 or 4 straight days of below freezing temperatures that were jeopardizing some work that we were doing on the second floor as well as the plumbing on the second floor. And so some plastic was set inside of the structure, which prompted a violation from the staff. So that ended up in court. The court gave us reprieve from the preservation permit until March 1, at which time we'll be taking down that plastic. And we'll be working with staff. This is the first step, I presume, in a multi-step process to figure out what we're going to do with the second floor of Rippey's. What we have proposed in this first round, and I was a little bit caught off guard, we've proposed several different options, but my understanding from talking with Ms. Ziegler and communicating with her, and I appreciate the correspondence with staff with me about what the procedural aspects of what we've asked to do. But we presented multiple options of things that would be acceptable to ownership based on the way the building is and where it sits and obviously keeping in preservation with the historic overlay. My understanding is that only one of those can be considered today and that the rest would need to be deferred until next month. That creates a procedural nightmare for us as far as notice goes. That means for the next 3 or 4 months, we're going to be back up here with different options, seeking review from this commission. And depending on how they go, whether we'll appeal those, we'll have multiple appeals to the circuit court, trying to deal with an issue on the second floor. What we've proposed today, and we have our architect with us to answer questions if the commission has them. He may be able to explain more of the details of what we've proposed. This is not a permanent enclosure. This is a problem that was created by an offhanded comment and discussion in the year 2000. About not enclosing the second floor. This is not meant to be an enclosure. We're looking for a solution to have a temporary drop down in those openings that are currently approved on the second floor of Rippey's during inclement weather. The ownership and staff is fully aware and has been aware now for well over a decade that the intent of the second floor of Rippey's is to leave that an open-aired patio, not to enclose it with brick and mortar and punch-out windows, which is what the staff has been asking us to do now for the better part of 2 or 3 months since this issue first came up. You can see it in the packet of materials that was submitted by Ms. Ziegler. She's provided those to me. What she is basically proposing and what the staff has proposed is that we tear down what's there now and put up brick and mortar walls with punch-out windows. And that's, frankly, seems to be a heavy-handed proposal by the staff. We'd like something in the middle. And what we've proposed is something that is not, we don't believe, is overly intrusive to the historic preservation in the area. It's a temporary drop-down garage doors that will be pulled down during inclement weather, and that's all. Prior to that, we had also put in something even less intrusive, which were pop-in, pop-out windows that were put in a metal track. That also was not something that was acceptable per the current preservation permit. We have some other options. I don't want to waste the commission's time with that, but that's where we are now. We have what we've proposed, and you can see on the last page of the packet of materials that were submitted is the sort of the final what this would look like with windows down, with railings up, with all of the detailing to match the columns below on the first floor, other details in order to conform the building to what we believe would make that second floor look as historic as possible under its current configuration without having to rip down the current columns and the roof structure and everything else that's presently there.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We may have some questions for you, but for now, okay? Yeah.
Sure. So I
Identify yourself, please.
Bart Gillespie, architect designer, that was started helping Mr. Smith out about a month and a half ago.
What's your name again?
Bart Gillespie, BART, GILLESPIE.
Thank you.
Read through the historic overlay, and I noticed that, I believe it was page 75 or 79. There's a statement that says that each building should be representative of its time and place, and there should be no modifications to make it to create a false sense of history. And so what we've tried to do is minimal modifications to enclose the exposed steel that's holding the temporary roof structure up. And so we've just kind of taken the existing millwork from the bottom, brought it up top, and also have a transom similar to, believe it's two other buildings on Broadway. We kind of use them as precedents. I believe one's the candy store and one's the old Bailey's, if you're familiar with that. So to exactly what we're trying to do, one has garage doors. I believe one of them has swing open doors, which is another option that we were proposing. That's kind of what we have right now. We have other options, but as I understand, we can't present them this week.
Okay. Do you have any questions to the general contractor, correct?
Architect. But my question was for the comment where it says each building should be representative of its time and place, right? And I believe Rippy's was under construction right after the building of the Bridgestone Arena. And so Rippy's was also one of the first kind of restaurants in that era that, if anybody was here around at that time, most of Broadway was, boarded up or, small gift shops selling T-shirts or records. There was a few bars, but it wasn't anything like it is now. So time and place, Rippy's was, I believe, restored back in 2000. And so to make it look like a historical building when it's not a historical building, I think goes against the statement on page 75. I could be misspoken, but so we're just trying to do minimal static modifications and then and close the space for inclement weather and to protect bent equipment. And so that's my question is really about the comment on page 75. Inside the historic overlay PDF that I read, where each building should be representative of its time and place and not try to convey a false sense of history. We're right next door to Bridgestone Arena, adjacent to Apple glass box, right? And like I said, this was not an existing historical building.
Okay. All right. Thank you. There's a minute 26 in case there's going to be rebuttal to any public comment. All right, open public hearing. Close public hearing. Commissioners.
Robin, could you clarify something for me, please? gentleman states that he had several options that he forwarded to you all, and that they were all not appropriate. Is that the case, and what were those options?
I've received two, and it's in your rules that you won't accept new information. So I received a second one after the deadline date.
Okay.
So it's not really appropriate for you to discuss that, and you haven't seen it.
So only two, and one was past the deadline.
Right, it was received after the deadline, so what's before you was received in time.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
And can I ask a question, Robin? And so applicant did not want to defer another month so we could hear it all at once?
Well, you don't take multiple options at one time.
Okay.
So they could have deferred and presented a new option to you next month, but they chose not to do that. They wanted to present this one to you this month, and I guess the next one next month, if this one should be denied. And it sounded like maybe there were more. I haven't seen them.
Okay, thank you. That helps, thank you.
And a related comment or question is that the staff did provide them with examples of things that would comply with the guidelines that they could have brought to us this month.
Yes, we did.
Thank you.
Would staff be, if there was a deferral, is it within staff's scope to take several options and to see if any of them are acceptable, or do they all have to be treated as individual items?
Yeah, we often work with applicants on multiple projects, multiple solutions to a project, and then one comes to you. We have given our advice, and the solutions don't fit that advice, so that is their option to come to you next month with a different proposal. And I don't think we had public comments, so there isn't a rebuttal time.
Just for the new commissioner as well. So our commission does not have, we don't do the deferral. It has to be the applicant that does the deferral. So just to clarify. Questions?
Not so much a question, I guess, a comment. I have the great fortune, or maybe misfortune, of being around long enough to have seen this in its earliest and first iteration. And in evaluating proposals for this property, specifically as they relate to the second floor, it's a struggle to evaluate something that's temporary, that certainly doesn't, to my eye, appear temporary, and I mean, full stop, I guess, is the struggle there. And I think that a garage door only in inclement weather puts an onus on the staff, and enforcement that really is beyond what I understand temporary to mean. Not as, we don't define temporary. Well, say certainly, I'm sure there's a definition of what temporary would be, but it's not in our guidelines as to what's temporary. And I think we would lean on the zoning code to figure that out, and how that works. I think those permits are a day, a number of days certain. So I think, in my mind, the evaluation from the staff in this case of whether this is truly a temporary solution, and somebody's going to be there to see that they go up and down if you buy into that, that's more than I think could be reasonably expected.
Yeah, I'll say, in general, this project has been going on for a long time, as the applicant said. I'm trying to evaluate it with fresh eyes, as if this was a new build in the overlay on Broadway. We have had numerous requests for similar windows, other types of windows that were not present historically, with rhythm and proportion of opening that was not there historically, and we have consistently denied them. In this case, I think the staff recommendation is consistent with those previous recommendations and decisions by the commission. And for those reasons, this is a weird one in that it started off as one thing, and it's kind of morphed into a weird building that would, I don't know, I can't imagine us approving this in recent years. So With that said, I encourage the applicant to continue working with staff and come up with a solution similar to other new builds that we have approved in recent years on Broadway that were win-wins for applicants and owners as well as the rest of Nashville and the visitors who will no doubt continue to visit Rippies. So I support the staff recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner.
I know the applicant requested a response to what the guidelines say about building reflecting its time, but the guidelines also require that those buildings have a relationship to the existing historic architecture and in the standpoint of building openings, relationship of those dimensions, verticality, those kind of things. So as I look at what's proposed here, to me it does not reflect what the historic architecture is, even though it is contemporary materials. And so with respect to 429 Broadway, I move for agreement with staff recommendation.
Vice Chair has made a motion, second by Commissioner Mayhall. All in favor of the motion? Okay. Any opposed? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes.
The next case is 215 Broadway. The application is to construct a second rooftop addition to the contributing building at 215 Broadway. The Moxie Hotel occupies two buildings which are connected at the rear and has a frontage at 215 Broadway and at 110 3rd Avenue South. The building is a contributing structure in the Broadway Historic Preservation Zoning Overlay. The contributing building at 215 Broadway includes an existing one-story rooftop addition that received building permits prior to the building's inclusion in the Broadway Historic Preservation Zoning Overlay. On this slide, you can see that existing addition there indicated by the red arrow. The proposal today is to add another one-story rooftop addition to the existing one-story rooftop addition, resulting in a two-story rooftop addition to the historic building. And that second rooftop addition is indicated by the red arrow there. The guidelines state that rooftop additions should not exceed 1 story in height. Therefore, staff finds that the proposal of a second rooftop addition on top of the existing rooftop addition does not meet the design guidelines. Furthermore, the proposed addition does not meet the required 30-foot step back from the front facade. While the primary mass of the addition is over 30 feet from the front facade of the building, a projecting balcony extends to be only 27 feet from the front facade, which is less than what is required and does not meet the design guidelines. Staff recommends disapproval of the proposed second rooftop addition to 215 Broadway, finding that the addition does not meet Section 3 of the design guidelines for a rooftop addition. Happy to take questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Joseph. Okay, applicant.
Good afternoon. My name is Doug Sloan. I'm with Holland and Knight, and I'm representing the applicant.
Hello, my name is Tyler Thayer. I am with Paradigm Studio, the architect on the project.
First, I want to thank all of y'all for your service to our city. Without commissioners and board members, the city come to a grinding halt pretty quickly. So thank you all. And thank you to Joseph for this review. If you've all had a chance to look at the review, you'll note that the issue is the fact that it is a second story addition. It is not in the architecture of what we're trying to do or the openings, but in the fact that the guidelines suggest that it should only be one. The image that we have up for you today and that we've provided everybody with a packet to take a look at shows what this this block looked like when Trail West still existed there to the west of the building that we're looking to do the addition on. And then the two-story building was to the east. I guess it was also Trail West at the time. Since that time, if we can go to the next image, and thank you, Joseph, for helping us out here. Trail West has gone down. It was completely removed. And the owner of the property at issue today also did renovations, if we go to the next one. And so after Trail West went down and Kid Rock's bar went up, it was elevated higher than Trail West was originally as an adjacent building. Then instead of demolishing as Trail West did on the western side, the Moxie Hotel maintained this facade and did open up some windows along the eastern side and put in essentially what was a glass box there on top to allow some light into the building and into those rooms. With the recent sale of the property to the east, Joseph, you will go to the next one. They have as well demolished the buildings next to them. And I point this out because I think all of you, want to see these buildings preserved. Certainly want to see them and not some of the facade-ectomies that we've seen across the street, but actually the buildings preserved. And that's what they've attempted to do with this section here on Broadway, as opposed to their neighbors to the east and to the west, who demolished their buildings and then built back the maximum massing that they could. If we can go to the next slide. This is what it will look like once Bottle Blonde to the east is built. So instead of having an even rooftop with the Trail West to the west and having window openings to the east with the historic building that was on either side of them, they are now in this valley that's created through the demolition of the other historic structures. So, but now they're being told that, and I understand, a strict application of the guidelines, I think is a better way to say that. Now, with a strict application of the guidelines, they're left in this valley without any light into their building. And what we're seeking is to bring the building up not any taller than either one of our neighbor buildings and no further closer to the street than either of our neighbor buildings. And after reviewing Joseph's comments, we've gone back and looked at our design and realized that there are things that we could do to further improve and bring into line the second level. One is we can meet the 27-foot step back instead of the 30-foot that we're at now. So we can bring that back. The other thing, and I'll turn it over in a moment to the actual architect, I'm an attorney. And the perspective of a pedestrian from the public realm, the sight line of our addition, we can pull back the one wall that we have right now that was supportive of a stairwell, and we can pull that back so that none of it will be visible from the public right-of-way. So from the pedestrian realm, looking up at the building, neither on the south or the north side of Broadway will this addition be visible. So with that, I'll turn it over to the people who actually know what they're talking about.
Thanks, Doug. Again, Tyler Thayer with Paradigm Studio. On this one, we wanted to illustrate in the lower right-hand corner, you'll see this is from the opposite side of Broadway. It's a perspective of what you would be able to see. And in what was submitted, we have not revised, but as Doug mentioned, we went through the report. The little bit that you can see, we believe that we can remove the glass awning that we were proposing there and pull down. So if you don't mind going to the next slide. If you see the stair, that's kind of, this is the egress stair that's required for egress. We believe we can remove those two glass awnings and pull down that stair so that it steps up with the line of sight so that that stair would remain near invisible. I don't even think you'd be able to see it. And we'll illustrate that on the next slide here in a second. And further.
Just a second, I'm so sorry.
Yes.
The commission doesn't take new information at the meeting.
Okay.
So they're just going to look at what you originally submitted.
Okay.
So if you want to talk about that, I think that would.
I apologize. We were just trying to say what conditions we could make to correct this, but I understand. So, no new information. Well, we can, okay, I'll start over. Sorry, I apologize. Thank you so much.
And you have 4 minutes.
All right, 4 minutes. The building would be lower than Bottle Blonde. Similar to Bottle Blonde, we are requesting a skylight that can add in some natural light. and an extension of the balcony that is currently aligning itself with Kid Rock. And on the right side, you would see the existing windows that are being covered up by bottle blonde, and this is kind of our solution for how we're going to deal with that and be able to bring natural light back into the space. And if you don't mind the one last image, which is the view site period, or the view diagram, to show the sight lines and how this is stepped back, and how our proposal is to put the new rooftop addition beyond the visibility of the sight lines, so that it's occupying space that is not publicly visible from the right of way, from the public right of way. I guess we'll reserve the last bit of our little time.
While I understand you can't take any new information, we're simply saying what you can do, I believe, is you can modify the recommendation of the staff. And so we were just simply saying, after looking at staff's comments, that there are modifications that we are willing to make to meet those comments, to satisfy those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, open public hearing. Close public hearing. Discussion.
Do the being visible from the right of way, I understood is important, at least for the residential aspects. Does that also apply to a project like this?
The visibility isn't really the issue. It's the amount of new construction that's on top of a historic building. And this has been a request that many have had, and all have been denied or didn't come forward.
Well, I want to just say, as far as the Moxie is concerned, I feel really badly for the building and the owners for, you've got all those windows. Now you don't have windows on the side, and I feel your pain on that. But I feel bad for you for that. It sounds like that y'all have some things that you might be able to do, and so I'm just wondering if they would be open to deferral and continuing to work with staff to get something that might be better for the building. And I just want to let you know that at least I'm very sympathetic to your situation and what has happened. And if there is anything that we can do to help you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Absolutely, we would be happy to take a deferral and make the adjustments that in response to Joseph's comments. I think, though we can do that, there is still the issue of the fact that this is a second story that's being added, even with those modifications, and that we would still be confronting that issue. The one thing that I would say, I know there's a lot been made of precedent here today, in this case and in others. But the precedent would have to be that of 3 historic buildings, 1 was maintained, the ones on either side were destroyed and maximized. That would be the next precedent. So if there's another circumstance where historic buildings are dropped on either side of an existing historic building and then maximized and built to as tall as they can, then yeah, I guess this would be precedent. The other concern with that I have is you're incentivizing the destruction of historic buildings and penalizing the maintenance of a historic building because they now have greater square footage. They have a lot better property to sell than the person who actually tried to maintain the historic structure. And so we will be happy to defer and make those changes, but know that you will still have that same issue before you at the next meeting.
Doug, from what I remember, the property on the corner, Trail West.
Yes, ma'am.
There was some sort of compromise to get the overlay done back in the day. And so there was, we would have never approved the tearing down of that building, but it was exempted from the overlay at the time in order to get overlay on the rest of Broadway. Is that And so I just
That
wanted,
is an accurate history. I climbed out on the roof with Tim Walker. I'm the former planning director for Nashville. And when they sought the demolition of that building, we went through it, and I only went through it as far as I was willing to. Tim, on the other hand, went out on the roof. I went up to the roof and did not go out on the roof because it was in such poor condition. So I agree with you. It was a part of the negotiations, maybe a strong word. It was part of the discussion of the overlay. But this building in particular had just demolition by neglect. It had fallen into such disrepair that I don't think it really could have been saved. I don't know of another building in this district that is in the condition that Trail West was in. I'm familiar with it today.
you should know since you were with the Planning Commission, but I have seen several others on Broadway that were almost falling down, that were restored. But like I said, you know better than that. And the other one, I remember it was not a contributing building to the, anyway. I'm just.
There was a 4-foot drop in the floor on the 3rd floor of Trail West when we walked out on it from the edge of the building to the center. That's how much that floor had bowed down.
Well, you know, you can say that there are buildings on Broadway and 2nd Avenue that, you know, they're so old and they neglect that you just can't save them. But I would respectfully disagree with you on that point. So.
I hope we don't lose any more.
I believe the Trail West was also illegally demolished in the middle of the night with no permits.
Well, I think it was legally demolished, but it was in the middle of the night. Tore one.
Thank you for your, are you done?
I'm done.
Mr. Sloan, thank you for your presentation. We struggle with these kinds of situations for the exact same reason that you've outlined. Well, this one next door was done this way. We have to consider each one on an individual basis. Trail West was a whole saga that we have just kind of gone back through. The 2-story building on the other side was found to be a non-contributing building, and therefore, under the rules of the guidelines, can be, in certain situations, non-contributing buildings can be demolished and rebuilt. The problem that we're going to have, that we do have here with the proposition to build a 2nd-story addition, is that Broadway is a bit of an arms race. And as soon as one thing is approved on one building, every property owner up and down is going to want it. So, like you brought up, precedent is something that we're always trying to consider. And for the remaining contributing historic properties like the Moxley building, we have to tread that line carefully. So I welcome a deferral and another discussion next month. But
yeah, can we make that this? So here's the option, and hearing that too, because the 2nd story is the issue. You can wait for us to go ahead and review this and get it discussion and get it disapproved or approved, so that you know how to move forward for this next month. Because if you defer it, you might bring us a new plan, but if that 2nd story is still there, that still may be the issue.
Can I put my deferral in my pocket until I hear the discussion?
Is that possible, legal? Just want to make sure. So this would be after our discussion, you would then make a decision whether you want to defer or not.
After your discussion, before you vote.
Okay.
So, quite frankly, Chairman, so that we have a clear understanding of what the commission wants. I think that's towards the goal that we're all trying to reach here.
And you kind of heard what the Commissioner Price has said, that we're pretty straight on with the design guidelines. So we just want to make sure that you understand if that comes, we may come back with the same decision. So you need to move forward and not waste your time, basically. Legal?
So your rules are not clear on when the deferral can or cannot take place. There can be requests for a deferral. There's a reference to when an item is deferred after a public hearing, so certainly that is something that can occur, and this commission can interpret its rules.
Commissioners, do you?
I just wanted to pile on, and I certainly don't want to speak for Doug, but I would think, as he stated when he got up, the critical item is the second floor.
Yes.
And I think he would want to understand
Yes.
where we stand, so his client, I mean, I'm sure they'll continue to pay you if you show up and defer next month, but your client doesn't want to unnecessarily expend, and you don't want to unnecessarily
Correct.
waste your own time. So, and even if there is not only deferral, but if there is a disapproval of the application, that we would treat a new application, on its merits, and it wouldn't prevent you from coming back. I think oftentimes, I'm not a fan of kicking the can down the road for something that might be inevitable. So I also wanted to point that out. For what it's worth.
Okay, so we're going to have discussion then. Okay, let's do it. Thank you. Have we closed public hearing? Just want to make sure. Okay, good. Because we're in discussion and sometimes I lose track of traffic, so. Yes, open and close. Thank you, Commissioner.
Well, we just went through a lot of angst on Second Avenue to get a second floor. And we heard it like 3 or 4 times. They wanted 3 floors on top of Second Avenue. And it was one of the most difficult, gut-wrenching decisions that we've had to make. And I don't feel comfortable making that decision on the fly today without a lot of discussion. So, because it would, as you said, it will just mushroom. And so, I don't know, that's just my 2 cents of it.
Yes, and with that said, the guidelines are not ambiguous when it says shall not be more than one story in addition on top of historic building. So with that said, I don't see how we have any other choice but to accept the staff recommendation.
I don't disagree with, the guidelines are explicit. The question that the applicant has posed before us is there a circumstance here where, zoning is established for access to light and air, and I think there, despite your feelings about or what has come before in legal, not legal, of how the neighbors, immediate neighbors have constructed buildings on either side, do we open that door? I'm not advocating for it, but I think that, again, that they made a presentation and it really hinges on that piece alone. I think a skylight is an option, and certainly I wouldn't consider a skylight an additional floor to remedy their circumstance, but certainly that doesn't provide the landowner the same benefit as the additional square footage, and I wouldn't pretend to sit up here and suggest that it does, but I think there are some remedies, albeit less desirable than they're previously had with more glass and glazing than they currently are able to have, just as an additional comment.
Well, and I would concur with that in that I think it is very unambiguous that it restricts it to a 1-story addition, but it doesn't restrict us from having the ability to make modifications to that existing 1-story addition that was put on. So I think some of the ideas that were proposed here with the skylights and all that might be applicable as modifications to the existing structure that would be much more amenable than what we have here. And so.
I don't have a whole lot new to add. I'm very sympathetic to the property owner, and I do think it's basically right that in this case, the guidelines do somewhat incentivize demolition of new building, but the commission is supposed to enforce the guidelines, not change them, and that seems like a pretty clear and simple one. So I think with a heavy heart, I'd probably support staff's recommendation.
With respect to 215 Broadway, I move that we accept staff's proposal.
Commissioner Cash has made a motion.
Mr. Sloan wanted to have the option of deferral before we voted. So I don't.
Sorry for that. I was moving on the move.
That's
wait,
okay. I was
hold
just
on.
about to dive
Yeah.
across the table.
I know, right? I know. Legal, do we need to have any kind of more by the commissioners to say, yes, we'll accept any?
We don't have a second, and I think she said that we don't have, our rules aren't clear as to where it
Yeah,
would be.
but she made the
I'm
motion,
speaking over the
so-
top.
Yeah, the rules don't say
Right.
at what point you may or may not accept a request for a deferral.
But
so
since she made the motion, does she retract the motion before he decides?
She can do that, yes.
I'll retract the motion.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We would request one meeting deferral.
All right, and I think we have to agree to that?
Yes, why don't you have a motion
Okay,
to defer?
we will have a motion to defer according to the applicant, by applicant request.
So moved.
Okay, Commissioner Mosley has made the motion and Commissioner Mayhall has seconded. All in favor of that deferral motion? Okay, any opposed? Okay, seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you. Continue to work.
Sorry, did that motion include a date certain, as
To
Mr. Sloan
the
suggested?
one meeting is okay,
Just
that's
making sure because
part
of
of
the
that.
notification
Sure,
requirements.
sure. Good clarification. So it will be at the next meeting.
Okay, the next case is 1003 Maxwell Avenue. The house at 1003 Maxwell Avenue is a circa 1910 bungalow-style house that contributes to the historic character of the Maxwell Heights Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. Over the years, the house has suffered from extreme deterioration and neglect. Around 2021, work was started with a codes permit and without a preservation permit. MHZC staff was not aware of a violation at the time. In spring of 2023, MHZC received an application for a rear addition and side dormers. Although drawings for the addition were submitted and were determined to meet the requirements for an administrative permit, staff requested a shoring plan for the work. A shoring plan was not received and staff therefore did not issue the permit. At some point in 2023, a foundation for the addition was built without a preservation permit and the exterior walls were removed. Some attempts at shoring were made during construction, however, the work was inadequate and the building was never properly protected, leaving it largely exposed to the elements. The partial renovation work combined with improper shoring and protection has exacerbated the deterioration of the home. The Property Standards Division now requests to demolish the home. Based on a recent inspection, MHZC staff found the home to be in such an extreme level of deterioration that it may soon collapse. The staff report outlines the issues with the home in greater detail, but to summarize today, staff found the home to be missing an adequate foundation and found what remains of the framing to be largely compromised due to rot, termite damage, and extreme deterioration. Based on staff observation, it seems that the roof and roof structure would need complete replacement. The foundation would need complete replacement, and most, if not all, of the wall framing would need complete replacement. The current owners purchased the property on December 2nd, 2022. It's assumed that the new owners were aware of the overlay as they began discussion with staff about a potential addition in January of 2023. While the home was likely already suffering from varying levels of deterioration prior to the current owner's purchase of the home in 2022, the partial demolition work combined with improper shoring and protection of the home since 2022 has exacerbated the deterioration of the home, and work has been undertaken without a preservation permit. Therefore, staff finds the hardship has been self-imposed. Section E5 of the Commission's Rules of Order states that demolition conducted without the required permits are prohibited, and when a historic building has been demolished without a permit, the Commission shall consider any new application request as if the historic building remained. Partial demolition has taken place without a preservation permit, and full demolition is now necessary due to the lack of preservation permits and the owner's self-imposed hardship. If the Commission finds that demolition does not meet the standards for economic hardship, then the unsafe conditions and property standard violations still exist and need to be addressed. Staff recommends the building be reconstructed using elevations provided in 2023 when an addition was considered by the applicant. Section 2A4 of the design guidelines allows for reconstruction if the building was contributing, and if it had an appropriate mass and scale for the neighborhood and is based on documentary evidence. The building is contributing and was an appropriate mass and scale for the district. The design guidelines also assume that a building is no longer existing as a condition for allowing reconstruction. Staff further recommends no additional preservation permits be issued until the reconstruction has been inspected and reviewed by the commission as to whether or not it is a true reconstruction of the historic building. So this is the recommendation. Staff recommends disapproval of full demolition of the house at 1003 Maxwell Avenue, finding that demolition does not meet section 1740-420E of the Ordinance for Economic Hardship and 3B of the Design Guidelines for Appropriate Demolition, and to allow the Property Standards Division to demolish the building in whole or in part as needed for the neighborhood's health and welfare. Staff further recommends that any new construction on the site be required to be a reconstruction of the historic building, and no additional permit may be issued until the new construction has been permitted and received a favorable inspection in regard to meeting that permit. I know that's a lot of information, so happy to answer questions,
Yeah, could you clarify what permits exist or don't exist at this point?
No preservation permits exist from us right now.
Demolition permits?
Not a demolition permit not a preservation permit demolition, yeah.
I followed the, I'm sorry, I followed the line here, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
And I feel comfortable I'm following the reasoning and sort of how it's cited and the why. My question is, as we get in the last couple of sentences of the staff's recommendation, which is for an additional permit to be issued, given that it's apparent that the new buyer wants a larger structure on the site, and when the permissiveness of that would be, my question tends toward that, is what level of completion of a reconstruction would then permit the process of applying to have a larger structure on the site? In other words, they have to close it all in on four sides and then tear off the back and string it out.
Yeah.
Asking for clarity there, really for the applicant's sake and for us to understand what we might require an applicant to do. Is it framed up and sheathed, but not all the finishing pieces are on it? Or there's a level of trust here that we have to have, and as we've seen from violation cases today, we certainly don't want to allow, we don't want to reward neglect and demolition and bad actors. So that's the nature of my question, really, as it relates to what extent will the applicant need to show compliance if, and this may be an offline conversation that you can communicate in the permit, but that was something in my mind that I'm wondering about. I take no issue with the staff's recommendation otherwise.
In the past, you've required it to be fully complete except for the rear wall if they know a rear addition is coming. We have no idea if that may be the case here. But you have required that that you could see that it is fully complete, windows are in, casings are in, that it's done.
So that the applicant would have made proper siding, reveal, material,
Right.
bought the proper windows for reconstruction
Right.
that are compliant with the guidelines and so forth. That brings the kind of clarity I was looking for. Thanks.
The exterior fully complete or okay.
Yes, the exterior, you don't review the interior at all, so we don't get into that question.
But I would assume that if the applicant wanted a larger house, reconstructed the existing house with a designed addition that met the guidelines, then it could be constructed all at once, as opposed to having to build the existing and then have it inspected and finalized and then build the addition. So,
In the past, you have required that the building be reconstructed and that they come back to you to prove that it has been reconstructed before they can ask for any additional permits.
well,
That's what
I seem to remember we've done it once, like you're saying, though, too. That may be too much in the weeds to get into right now, but I feel like we have done that. But I guess in this particular case, we don't know. That's a conjecture,
Right.
and the staff recommendation remains.
We are with the applicant right now. Is the applicant here? Okay. The applicant's not here? Okay. Oh, well, the applicant's Metro, so it's not really the buyer.
Apparently the property owner's not here.
Yeah.
Metro is not here either.
Right, yeah, just clarification, so the applicant wouldn't be here.
Thank you for bringing that up. So that begs the question of, so the applicant scenario, for the safety of the neighborhood and welfare, which Metro is within their rights to cause demolition to occur, whether the owner pays for it or not, that could occur, and then a lien would be placed on the house, as I understand how those things work. Then if the applicant went to go sell the property, would an informed buyer might not know what, like there's a structure there now, and this carries with that. There's not a scenario where this wouldn't carry with that, and I think is a deed restriction or something along those lines necessary, or is that just overkill? We were just expecting honesty and transparency in the sale of this property after it's great.
They have an obligation to declare that. But yes, it does run with the property, so a future owner would also have to abide by your decision.
Thank you.
Just in case this gentleman that's walked in hasn't he? Okay, nope, okay.
So I have a question for you, Robin. Or actually for Joseph, sorry. So we're going to require this terribly, essentially demolished building to remain a safety hazard if we approve your staff recommendation? No?
The staff recommendation is to allow property standards to demolish the house.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood. Thank you.
But a reconstruction once it's demolished. Yeah.
I think it transfers the responsibility of we're not approving a demolition is basically what it amounts to. And I think it is a legal, it's a health and safety piece where we're not on record as allowing demolition, but that demolition should occur if I'm sort of seeing how the mechanism is working.
You know what, because I haven't closed public hearing yet, and then we should discuss this, right? We should be under discussion. Is that right? We haven't closed public hearing yet? Okay. I did, and, right, there's no applicant. Okay, so how about this? It's been a long day. Open public hearing. Okay, nobody wants to dare to public hearing, okay. Have to have a little lightness in this afternoon. So we've opened public hearing, we're going to close public hearing, and now we can have some more discussion.
I think that this is a pretty straightforward, situation, and the staff report to me is pretty clear and pretty clear on what our action should be. I guess the only reservation that I have is that if any buyer, the existing owner, a new one comes back and wants to do something, I do have a little bit of a reservation about requiring that entire house to be built before we even look at what an addition might be to it. It just seems to be an onerous condition to place on any owner. And the other thing that I think is that we ought to change the language in the staff recommendation where it says until new construction has been permitted, and we should put a clause in there, including a preservation permit, just to make it clear that since we keep coming up with that all the time. So.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair.
Practically, just as a matter of discussion, practically, I think it's impractical to build part of a building and leave the back open, roof it, gutters and downspout, do all the things, and then hear and permit something in the future. But I think, unfortunately, for good actors, bad actors often ruin it for the rest of us. And I think the staff and in their discussion wants the extra motivation, and while it may be onerous, that provides a greater insurance that it will occur and that we won't have things get sideways in terms of small details like corner boards and siding exposures and things like that. That would be the other side of the coin, or the other side of the argument that I think I see, and I think I'm reading into this. I do agree that it's impractical, but I also lean pretty heavily on, we need to carry a big stick.
And most assuredly, this is coming back to us again anyway when this happens, right?
We want to be assured.
Right. We want to be assured.
So with that said, being assured, is this recommendation a solid one? Other than you adding in that we shall have a preservation permit. Shall would be the optimum word. No. I just want to be sure we're good, that we feel comfortable that it's going to come back to us for any kind of, a preservation permit for sure, and that we can have review over anything that gets us to that lot. Because it is a little odd that, you have property standards that can do this. So I just want to be sure the commission is comfortable with the recommendation languaging.
One question out of ignorance. Would the requirement that there's a preservation permit pulled on any new construction and that entail a reconstruction of the historic building, would that not ensure that it does come back to staff and us? I'm trying to think, what is the normal permitting time for a preservation permit? Because I'm trying to think, if you get halfway through a house, I don't want to incentivize vacant demolition, just sitting there for years, because if it takes a couple of months to get a normal permit, I would think this adds a layer to that. And if you get 6 months in and have to wait 6, 8 months and then try to build the rest of it, that's going to take a unique, I think, property owner to be able to feasibly do that.
Sure. New construction will come back to you no matter what. So the properties are all flagged in a system that all the Metro permitting departments use, and so no matter what, you will see new construction. Our recommendation is that it be reconstructed first before any additional permits are issued. It's also a way to make sure people understand the severity. Mm-hmm. This building hasn't been fully torn down, but it's in the shape that it's in because of the applicant, the property owner.
I can understand showing the severity, but I think that to address your concerns, the way I see this happening is that if you do have a buyer that comes along that wants to take this property and do something with it, they have to not only clear the title with any demolition cost or whatever the city may have imposed on that, but then they also have to come back in and apply for a permit for construction of the house as it was, and then get the approval for that, and then go through, since it's a custom house, probably a year to build that. But they cannot be assured that they can do the addition until that is fully completed, a use and occupancy permit issued, and then to come back to this body for the addition, for it to be considered, and then to construct that. So you're really talking about probably at least 2 years before occupancy could happen. So it may well encourage a vacant lot sitting there for a while.
Could we, in that scenario, leave a light in the door that we would consider, the commission, the staff and the commission would consider at least an application, and still carry that, you could know that if you bought this and wanted to put the addition on it, we would review it, but that still the sequencing would remain. That you would need to frame and enclose this portion of the house, and it would meet inspection. And that if an applicant went to the trouble to put together a scenario and get into some detail, that we would at least consider that. And I think perhaps the staff would be open to that.
Could an application be reviewed and even accepted but not be issued until that approval, so they know that they can do it and they cannot start on it until
An applicant can bring anything they want to you. So you can make this decision, and then maybe someone buys it and they don't want to wait, and then they'll come to you with that application. They'll come to you and say, I know that this happened and we need to reconstruct it, but we'd like to go ahead and get the whole thing now. and you can review that.
So in that scenario, they would come to you for a permit, a preservation permit, which would probably not be issued for the addition if there was one included, and it would come to us.
Well, we wouldn't do anything because it would be all new construction. So it would come to you and they would say, hey, here's our drawings. We are going to reconstruct this house and we want to put this addition on the back as well. Will you please consider them both together? And then you'll make the decision as to whether or not that's something you want to do.
I'm good with that. I like that. And I think, no matter what they're doing, whether it's the original construction or with an addition, it still has to comply with the permitted drawings.
Right.
It's still a violation if they don't build it per the permitted drawings.
But that all being said, I'm not sure why we have to add that additional step. I mean, it is coming to us, and we will get to make that determination. And I hate to vote for set a staff recommendation and then turn around and vote directly against what we approved. I mean, I don't know if that's just based on the ownership. I don't know. I'm fairly happy with most of the staff recommendation.
But we're not approving any future building at this point today.
No,
right.
It all has to come back.
Right.
I think that there is a good bit of speculation as to what might happen.
Right.
So I think maybe we could just address it as you have in the past, and then who knows what might happen in the future or what requests might come through.
Okay.
So with all that said, with respect to 1003 Maxwell Avenue, I move for disapproval of this project with staff recommendations, but with the inclusion within that staff recommendation that where it says no additional permit may be issued until a new construction has been permitted, comma, including a preservation permit, comma, and received a favorable inspection.
There is a motion. There's a second by Commissioner Williams. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, seeing none. Thank you for the discussion.
Okay, next up is 323 50th Avenue South. It is a pre-1908 folk Victorian frame house that contributes to the historic character of the Park and Elkins Conservation Overlay. The
Lisa,
applicant...
Just for a second, so we've been in session for 2 hours. After your presentation, we shall take a 10-minute break.
Sure.
Thank you.
The applicant is proposing an addition with some partial demolition and an outbuilding. Everything meets the base zoning setbacks. The addition is 2 feet taller, and because...
Okay. Interruption again. I've gotten some signals. We probably should go ahead and take that now.
Okay.
So we don't break up the, yes. Okay, thank you. 10-minute break. Thank you for your patience.
quick summary of what I said before. The house is contributing in the Park and Elkins conservation overlay. A proposal is for some partial demolition, addition, and outbuilding. Everything's meeting the base zoning setbacks. The addition is going 2 feet taller. There is some extreme grade on the lot, so because of that, they're getting a basement level just because of the natural drop in grade. Here is the right side elevation. The addition does include a rooftop deck, which is kind of highlighted there with the cloud. It's above the first floor, and here it is in plan. So it's an upper level deck showing on the plan here. So it's not access from the main house, but from the addition. The design guidelines state that rooftop decks are not appropriate on side additions or on the side of rear additions. So that part of the house is an addition. Just to be clear, it's not going on top of the historic structure, but on the addition on the side. This rooftop deck is inset just 2 feet 4 inches from the back corner of the house where it will be visible. It is also large at over 200 square feet. Staff finds that the proposed rooftop deck does not meet the design guidelines because it is located on the side of the addition. So again, the design guidelines said that rooftop decks are not appropriate on the side, on side additions or the side of rear additions. So this is the side of a rear addition. Prior to the adoption of the consolidated design guidelines in May of 2021, the design guidelines did not include clear language about rooftop decks and additions as it does now. Because of this, similar rooftop decks have been approved where the consolidated design guidelines didn't apply, such as at 1005 Paris, which the applicant will show photos of in his presentation. So because the rooftop deck is located at the side of the addition, which does not meet the design guidelines, staff recommends that the rooftop deck be eliminated from the plans and that this portion of the addition have a sloped roof form to meet the design guidelines. Here's the proposed outbuilding, which meets all the design guidelines. Here is the summary of the staff recommendation. It's pretty much our standard recommendations, except for the fact that number 5, the roof deck on the right side of the addition be eliminated, and this part of the addition have a roof slope of at least 612. Happy to answer any questions, and the applicant is here.
Thank you, Melissa.
Do I need to use that? That one, there we go, okay. My name is Martin Wick. I'm at 912 Bailey Street. I'm the architect for this project. First, I wanted to talk about the sort of the second half of that condition number 5, requesting a slope on this roof. Flat roof additions are not prohibited by the guidelines and are pretty frequently approved. I can't pull up the drawings because they were on the consent agenda, but there were 2 projects on the consent agenda with flat roof additions on them. One was 2101 Grantland, which had a pretty large screen porch as a side, not just a rear addition, but a side addition to the house with a completely flat roof. The other one was submitted by our office at 519 Fatherland, which has a pretty large addition that is entirely a flat roof as well. We had no comments on those. As I said, they were on consent. And so I don't understand why the note about adding a roof slope to this section of the addition is being added to this recommendation. I don't think that's supported by the guidelines, and I think that at least that part of the condition needs to be removed. As far as the rooftop deck is concerned, I think this is something that it was added during the consolidation, as Melissa said, and I think the wording on it is a little confusing. I mean, even she kind of had a little bit of trouble getting through it, as it says something about side addition, not being appropriate on side additions, being appropriate on rear additions, but not on the side of rear additions. And I remember when this came up during the consolidation, I remember asking about whether this needed more clarification and asking about it because it removed a previously available design solution that we had used on projects within the design guidelines. This is 1005 Paris, which was back in 2017, 2018 maybe, I think, where we had a similar roof form actually to what we're dealing with right now, where it was a bunch of very short gables, several pointing towards the rear, which is a very difficult roof form to design an addition that meets that, because we had to leave
those ridges, exposed, we have to be shorter than them. And so a lot of times the easiest way to do that is essentially not to put a roof on a portion of the addition. So the flat roof section really separates the historic house from the addition. It makes it very clear the delineation between the two. And in this case, we designed it with a roof deck, which was approved in the previous guidelines. Consolidation added the new guideline talking about rooftop decks, but it also defines rooftop decks specifically. And if you look up that definition, it says an uncovered deck projecting from or recessed into the roof form of a building. It is generally located at or above the primary eave of the portion of the roof to which it is attached. In my mind, that seems to suggest something that is, you have a gable and you're trying to tack a roof deck onto it, or you're trying to sort of scoop out a section of that roof and create a new deck inside of it. This is not either of those. This is a section of flat roof addition that doesn't have a roof to sort of tack a deck onto. It's just a flat roof. And I don't really see what the distinction is between just, having an EPDM roof and putting pavers on top of that. If there is something about how it's detailed, like if the parapet wall isn't appropriate and it should be a railing, I think that's something worth discussing. But I don't think that this guideline specifically addresses this type of design where it's a flat roof on a portion of an addition, as opposed to trying to create a rooftop deck on an actual designed roof somewhere. So I'm looking for some clarification on whether this is an appropriate place for a deck, but I also don't think that the flat roof needs to be removed based on the guidelines either. I'm happy to answer any other questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wick. Any questions to the applicant? Okay, not at the moment. Open public hearing. Close public hearing.
Thank you. I suppose I'm okay with the proposition to modify the recommendation to allow for a flat roof in this section. We as Mr. Wick pointed out, we routinely approve those on additions. I'm less persuaded by the argument that it should just go ahead and might as well be a deck. The guidelines I'm looking at here say they're not appropriate on side additions. And the intent of the guideline is to put that on the rear of a building where it's not publicly visible, which I believe this one probably would be. So those are my thoughts.
In terms of interpretive opinion, I'll proceed. I think putting something on the rear, having rooftop additions and being at least on some weekends or in some magazines, the bachelorette party capital of the world, it was a nod towards being respectful to your neighbors and not necessarily regulating that you can't have a gathering at your house, but that if it's going to happen, the rear of a property is the more appropriate place for a deck. You can still make a lot of noise on that deck too, so I'll accept that. Personally, just on from an architectural standpoint, I have seen 99 out of 98 applications that have a flat roof with a solid parapet that are just clumsy at the end of the day. They're architecturally, they're clumsy, and they're not historically seen. And so that's my personal opinion about how the detailing of those occurs, but that's not written in the guidelines. I think the nod is really more towards where is the appropriate location for that to happen. And I'm in agreement that a flat roof and I'm compelled by the applicant's position that a flat roof can be a device that separates the new from the old, and roof forms are difficult to resolve in these projects, especially on tight projects where you're looking to maximize space underneath gables. And without that ability, it makes it even that much harder, and you've got roofs crashing into each other, and I think this project resolves the roofs well on its own. And so to take that out of the toolbox, I'm compelled by that argument.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Happy to make a motion. With regard to 323 50th Avenue North, I move for approval of the staff recommendation with the conditions, with listed conditions, with the revision to the back half of condition 5 that a flat roof may be appropriate in this instance.
Okay. Is that clarification for wording, Ms. Ziegler?
I do need a little more information. Are you saying that the roof deck
The roof deck,
proposal can be replaced with flat roof and not be a deck?
yes.
Okay.
Well, we could talk about this more. My understanding that was the applicant's request.
So no roof deck.
No roof deck.
No roof deck.
I would, if we're in discussion, I have an additional comment that the application shows a parapet that has a unique material on it, and that parapet is not accepted as part of the flat roof solution, that it should have, a proper roof edge and resolve the roof in that way with treating the water either internally or externally as you normally would in that situation, and that there not be a railing at that location or something that could be construed as a railing, which would include a parapet. The parapet's inappropriate for the design.
Ms. Ziegler, is that good wording then? Okay, very good. All right, so there's the motion. There's a second by Vice Chair. All in favor? Okay. Any opposition? Seeing none, hearing none, that motion passes. Thank you.
All right, next is 1129 Howard Avenue. This is an application for the addition of a front porch to a contributing house in the Englewood Place Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. This house was constructed in the 1950s, and based on the Sanborn map from 1957, there was not a front porch on the house originally. These are a little backwards, sorry. You want to start on the bottom right. There you can see that by 1968, a small projecting porch had been added. It was supported by metal poles resting on brick piers. There was a flat roof with a stylized ribbed facing. Above that, you can see the same porch seemed to still be there as late as 2016. By 2019, the roof had changed, and today there's no cover, just the brick piers remaining. The applicant is proposing to construct a new front porch to rest on the existing brick piers. The proposed porch will extend the roof line of the front gable and will be approximately 8 feet deep by 14 feet wide. The location of the proposed porch at the front of the existing house and the alteration of the original roof line did not meet the guidelines. This work will disturb the front facade and alter the original roof form, which are not permitted. While there was a front porch here for years, it was not an original historic feature. It did not contribute to the character of the house, and it no longer exists. The design and materiality were incongruous with the architectural style of the house. Staff finds that the prior existence of a non-contributing feature does not justify its reintroduction, particularly on the primary street-facing front facade. Therefore, staff recommends disapproval of the proposed front porch. The applicant is here and wishes to speak. Do you have questions for me first?
Thank you, Jenny.
My name is Jeff Henry. I am the homeowner. And first of all, this is my first time doing this, so I appreciate it and thank you guys for your time. But when you walk around the neighborhood in a pretty wide radius, every single house except for 2, including mine, has a really nice front porch on it. So really what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to add that Because it doesn't, this house right now, as it is contributing, it does not necessarily contribute to the fabric of the neighborhood. And I just want to restore, I want to keep the historic factor of the house and really highlight that while adding a front porch so it can match the surrounding homes in the neighborhood.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, open public hearing. Close public hearing. Does this seem pretty straightforward, commissioners?
I'm in agreement with the staff's analysis of the proposed front porch. The fact that it had a different front porch that didn't interrupt the existing roof line. I could feel differently about something like that, but certainly as proposed, it is not meeting the guidelines and certainly is detrimental to the historic roof line.
Okay, thank you.
I agree with Commissioner Mosley. I also understand with the perspective and the wishes of the applicant to have a front porch. We've had over the years several requests to build front porches on contributing historic homes and have consistently hewed to the guidelines that unfortunately for the applicant don't allow them. So I also agree with the staff recommendation.
Thank you.
I don't think you'll find a greater proponent of front porches than me. I spend a lot of time there. They're wonderful. Unfortunately, not only do we have our guidelines that we adhere to, but the national guidelines that are issued by the Department of the Interior prohibit changes to the front of a structure. And so there are limited areas where you can change, and certainly changing the roof form, adding a porch, those kind of things are unfortunately beyond our ability to approve based on our charge, both from Metro and from National. So I hate it, but that's the way it is. And it's just because of the character defining nature of the original home and trying to preserve that. Sure. So with respect to 1129 Howard Avenue, I move for disapproval per staff recommendations.
There's a motion. Second by Commissioner Cashin. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Thank you, applicant, for waiting this long.
Okay, next up, we have 107 4th Avenue North. This is an application for the addition of a front marquee structure and signage at 107 4th Avenue North, where infill is currently under construction. On the north side, facing an alley, the applicant is proposing a wall sign. This particular sign meets all the design guidelines. Unless you have questions about that one, we'll move to the more complicated ones. 3 different signs are proposed for the front elevation. The allotment for projecting wall and canopy signs is 105 square feet. The projecting sign shown here is 100 square feet, and it meets all the guidelines for size. The applicant is proposing to mount the sign just under the 4th floor window sills. The design guidelines call for such signs to be mounted no higher than the 3rd floor sills. Staff finds that this higher placement could be appropriate in this instance because the structure is taller than most of the buildings in the overlay and because it is situated on a side street, not on Broadway itself. So the slightly higher positioning will not appear visually jarring the way it might on Broadway. The applicant is proposing a skyline sign for the front elevation. To have a skyline sign, a building needs to be at least 75 feet tall. In the past, this measurement has been taken at the front wall of the building and has not included taller additions, rooftop additions, or stepped back upper levels. This building, therefore, does not qualify to have a skyline sign, and so we are analyzing it as a wall sign. In the past, in similar conditions with a step back front facade, we have allowed, the commission has allowed additional allotment because of the low visibility. Staff recommends a second allotment of 105 square feet for the stepped back portion of the wall, and that the 171 square foot sign be decreased to meet the second front allotment. The raceway should meet the guidelines for wall sign raceways. The applicant is proposing to add a marquee to the front entry. Marquees are considered to be a type of canopy. The design guidelines for new construction specifically state that primary entrances should be defined with a canopy or other architectural feature. As such, a modest marquee or canopy structure could be appropriate here. However, it should cover only the central double doors rather than the full recessed entryway, and it should not have bare bulbs. Staff recommends a width of approximately 8 feet. The applicant is further proposing a digital message board for the 3 faces of the marquee. Assuming approval of the projecting sign, only 5 square feet of allotment remain for this facade, and the property does not qualify for digital copy. Staff recommends removal of this proposed sign. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the proposed signage with all of the following conditions or disapproval. And please note we've added to condition 2 that bare bulbs shall not be allowed under the marquee. It's complicated, there are a lot of pieces. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Jenny.
Yeah.
I noticed the marquee sign is measured in inches, but we're talking if your recommendation is in feet. Can you
Yes.
translate that for us, please?
I already have. I've done the math for you.
Oh, good, because I'm not good at math.
Yeah, I checked it and rechecked it. Yes, it was presented in inches, but we analyzed it in feet.
Right, so they're requesting something like 27 feet of marquee, and you are recommending 8 feet.
Yes, so they are requesting a marquee that goes, I don't have my readers, 326 inches, whatever that is. It was probably 20, somebody doing quick math. It was a lot of feet. We're suggesting that it be reduced so it's just above the double doors rather than stretching across that whole recessed entryway. Okay, the applicant is here.
Sure. Thank you. Applicant, come forward.
Do you guys want to speak?
Yeah, go ahead.
I think we had.
Hello, my name is John Barnett. I'm the architect. I was just going to touch briefly on note number 1 about the front canopy, the 8-foot recommendation. So I just feel it's appropriate for a building of this size and scale to have a canopy that's wider than 8 feet. The building is roughly 60 feet wide. It's six stories tall. Bigger buildings to me need a bigger base, as well as just for cover for patrons and people out on the street in inclement weather. I feel like a bigger canopy would be better suited for that. Jenny, could we switch to the close-up version just real quick of that front elevation that shows that? And a couple things that are hard to read here in 2D, but I think they're applicable for this discussion, is that where we're showing this 27-foot wide, that section of the building is actually inset 3 or 4 feet at that point, so the canopy lines up with that inset. And also, what you can't see here, but I feel is very important, is that there are also additional doors on each side of those sidewalls within that inset that people will use. So for those reasons, we really just feel that a wider canopy is appropriate. And not to beat a dead horse, I know Mr. Kelly touched on it at the beginning of the meeting and other people have as well. But there are also other, establishments downtown that have set a precedent for wider canopies. The Margaritaville restaurant has one that's quite wide. Hetty B's on 5th and Broad has one, and the Whiskey River Saloon also have very long canopies along the street. So we're hoping that we can have a discussion about it, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thanks.
I have a question before you step away.
Sure.
So in reading this elevation view, absent the plan, the pilaster, so there's doors, triple windows, and then there's a pilaster.
Mm-hmm.
And the pilaster is part of the inset of the architecture.
That's correct.
It's an innie, not an outie.
That's correct.
All the way across there.
That's correct,
And
yeah.
the doors then would be, those windows appear to be at the corner. So those windows turn the corner, and then there's there's an opening around the corner on both sides.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yeah, that's exactly
Thank you.
right.
I just want to
Yeah.
make sure I
Sure.
understood your suggestion. Thanks.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. You may have some more questions, but, okay. Open public hearing? Oh, sorry. Yeah, do you have some time?
How you doing? I am Jim Rowan with Sign Me Up. I'm the guy building the signs and designing the signs and all that kind of thing. As far as the canopy, what I can speak to that is We're okay with removing the message center we were going to put on there. I just feel like it is an appropriate area above the doors where it's the egress in and out. As far as the wall sign, the skyline sign at the top, we're fine. Historic's done a great job. We've been working together and going back and forth to come up with a really good compromise of how it's a very unique building. While the skyline's going to be smaller, I think we'll be okay with that reduced square footage up there. But we would ask if you definitely consider that canopy for the guests. That's it.
Question on sign construction, if we're not doing movable copy, would that just be, break metal or something along those lines to make up that
Yeah,
sign?
it would be a solid.
Just a solid bar,
Yeah,
being the color of
aluminum.
metal.
We typically build all of our awnings out of aluminum, just so no rust and that kind of stuff. And then the only one other thing I think I would want to mention is, I noticed that on some of the other canopies they approved, has been approved to have the bulbs underneath the awning. And even if I had to recess them, I'd be willing to do that. I would love to put some soft light underneath there, just because that section of the street, as you go up, it's really dark. There's no lights up there.
Sure. And I had a question for you about that, because the recommendation specifically mentions no bare bulbs, but I don't know if it's in this district, but I think I recall an acrylic light that's not a bare bulb. It's an LED light that looks bulb-ish.
Yeah.
That we've approved specifically on marquees before. I think I would ask the staff if I'm misremembering or that was a different board.
I did put it in there. It's in the proposal, and it would be, it wouldn't be visible unless you get underneath the awning.
And I think the bare bulb, my comment is the bare bulbs break and they're not maintained, and maybe that's why they weren't deemed appropriate, and that type of signage generally was not present specifically on Broadway and Second Avenue. But we can talk about that over the discussion period. I just wanted to see if you had a response to that, or I built another sign in the district that you could confirm.
Yeah. And these are also dimmable too, so we can set that dimming at the right, so if we think, it didn't look, we can bring it down.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Sean Henry, 500 11th Avenue North, representing the property owner and TC Restaurant Group, here with the applicant team. There's 6 conditions recommended by staff, and we're comfortable with the 5. It's just condition number 1 really is the only point that we're discussing with you here this afternoon. And if we could go back to that photograph, if we could, that image, you see how the width of that marquee is very proportional to the vertical rise in that blade sign. If that horizontal band was reduced down to 8 feet, we think it would totally throw out of proportion those two vertical and horizontal elements of this facade. And you hear a lot about rhythm and scale and proportion, and we submit that this is very proportional. And more than that, it's functional. And you often don't address issues of functionality when you're looking at architecture, but this particular marquee as a architectural element is extremely functional in that it's keeping people under cover as they're headed into this facility, for whether it's for the restaurant or for the entertainment component of it. So I think of the old buildings that had marquees, the Woolworths on Fifth Avenue. So that recess, having this element come out over the entire recessed area creates that real welcoming, front porch for this business. And we submit that it's appropriate to have it as proposed. So we hope you'll approve it without condition number 1. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Henry. Anyone else from your team? Okay, all right. Now I'll open a public hearing, and seeing none, we'll close public hearing and in discussion. And it sounds like everything is good except for number 1.
I have a question for the architect, a technical question on item 1 and the marquee. So for clarity, the marquee is proposed to flush out with the front of the open, plus or minus an inch, but the proposal is that it be flush with the main facade, or with the outy part of the facade. in terms of how the sign is constructed. It just sort of notches in there, and then it would flush out with the rest of the
Jenny,
facade.
Can we switch back to that one more time? So it does project out over the sidewalk.
There you go.
48 inches. Yeah, that image there on the top.
So its total depth is 8 feet, and it's forward of the building in its entirety.
Yeah, so the canopy depth is 4 feet, and then the inset is another 4 feet.
Okay, so
Inside
total,
the
yeah,
building.
48.
Yeah,
Thank you for clarifying, because I'm a little dense there. So.
No worries.
Madam Chairman, this is an interesting building. I'm compelled by the applicant's arguments, and especially if there are doors on the sides of this area that we can't see on this drawing. That does sway me. So, I don't have a problem with the additional width for the canopy as shown on the drawings.
I agree with you,
May I
Commissioner.
interrupt for just a second before you get into your deliberation? I don't think we've opened or closed public hearing. Okay, thank you. Sorry about that. We were chatting.
There was some confusion in my mind because I was initially, when I first read the staff report, and I'm looking at it now, I was thinking that this was a problem mostly because it was going to add additional signage to the front, but now it's not. It's just purely a marquee structure or a canopy structure. And if that's the case and there is no sign planned for it and it's not violating the very elaborate formula that we have to calculate what's allowable signage, then I also think that it makes sense given the size of the recessed entrance.
And also, if they don't plan to have any kind of signage there, like ask forgiveness later, we don't want that. Just for the record.
I too, I'm in agreement with the analysis that 8 feet is kind of weird and weak looking for a building of this stature. Just on the facade, it looks not correct. So 8 feet, I don't think is the answer, although I understand the staff's position. It doesn't want to be less than 8 feet because it covers the front 2 doors, but that seems adequate, and rain never falls, at least most of the rain I've experienced doesn't fall straight down. So the side, again, that it covers some side doors, I too am compelled by the applicant's argument there and its constructability. I think they've clarified some of those things. It will contain no movable type or any signage at all, keeping it within the guidelines. I do think, I feel like the staff can work with the applicant on not having bare bulbs. Am I mistaken that we've had not a chasing lights, but that there have been lights that appear to be a bare bulb, but it's more of an acrylic thing with an LED bulb in it, so it doesn't have to be changed out and those kinds of things?
That's been more on signage. I don't know that it would work underneath a marquee.
That was a signage solution, and a marquee is, to your point, is not a sign, and so, okay. I know the bare bulb is not a desirable piece, and at this point, it would be exterior. It would fall under the guise of exterior illumination, but the exposed bulbs for exterior illumination would also be something we wouldn't want to see. Thanks.
I do think that the marquee is deep enough at 29 inches where you could have, a recessed ceiling and concealed lights that would give you the light that was requested without having bare bulbs.
So can I make a suggestion? So since we are going to number 1, that you add some languaging about just staying within the very elaborate math that we do for allotment for signs, just to be sure that in the future that they're not going to put any signage there. Whoever makes that motion.
Anything else? So with respect to 107 4th Avenue North, I move for approval with staff recommendations, with the exception that the marquee shall be the width as shown on the submitted drawings, the applicant submitted drawings, and that it not contain any signage.
Second.
There's a motion by the vice chair and a second by Commissioner Mayhall. All in favor? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you, applicant. Appreciate it.
Next application is for 606 8th Avenue South. So the building located on this lot was designated as an historic landmark by Metro Council in July 2021. The building was constructed circa 1945 as a warehouse for the GNS Distributing Company, although parts of the structure may date to the 1880s when it served as grain warehouse for GP Rose Green Company. The request is to install 2 internally illuminated cabinet wall signs. Both wall signs are proposed to be located above the window openings of the second story, with one sign located on the 8th Avenue South facade and one located on the right side elevation. As proposed, both signs can meet the allotment for the building, but do not meet the design guidelines for location and design. The design guidelines state that wall signs should be located below the window sills of the top floor. In this case, the historic building is 2 stories, and both signs are located above the second story windows. In order to meet the design guidelines, the signs can be located below the second story window sills. For cabinet signs, the design guidelines state that the background must be opaque and only graphics, text, and logos may be illuminated and are limited to a halo of up to 1 inch around these elements. The commission has previously found that the background for cabinet signs needs to be dark in order to meet these requirements, since illumination is typically visible beyond that 1 inch halo in cases with a white or a lighter colored background. So staff recommends that the background be dark to ensure opacity. No flashing or sequential lighting is proposed with this signage. This sign does have the lettering, and the arrow do include push-through acrylic bulbs, which, yes.
One project too early, sorry.
Yeah, which the commission has approved previously for signs. In conclusion, staff recommends approval of the wall signs with the following conditions: that the wall signs be relocated to meet the design guidelines for location. Cabinet depth shall not exceed 13 inches. It just was not noted on the plans. And the background of the wall signs shall be dark to ensure that the illumination standards for cabinet signs are met. So with these conditions, staff finds that the project can meet the historic landmark design guidelines.
Thank you, Melissa. Hey, applicant.
Hello, my name is Ben Montague. I'm the owner of Carter Vintage. I'm not a Nashville, not from Nashville. I've been coming to this wonderful city since 2007 and moved with my wife and children in 2021. We acquired Carter Vintage in 2022. We employ 30 people now. We're about to move from our home at 625 8th Avenue South to 606. We have a huge amount of traffic that comes through our doors. Big part of when we acquired the business from Christian Walter was to keep the heritage of the brand. And so signage for us is everything. And this is the sign that is currently opposite the Antiques building, which we would love to move across, but we're not able to in terms of the actual sign itself. So we've taken the designs and we put them into a box sign, and we've put them onto this location because we take the whole of the first floor. The reason why we would request would be to have the white background is just so that we have visibility, because visibility for us is everything. We have about 400 people through the doors on a Saturday. We're a Nashville loved brand, and we want to be able to continue that so that people know where we are. When you move a business, any business, it's hugely challenging to move into a new location, even though it's literally opposite the street. It's still hugely challenging for us. So we just want to make sure that our customers know where we are so we can continue to serve them. Also, Two Hands, who is directly below us, they have a white background, which is hard to see there with the pink line on it, but they're a white background with blue writing. We feel that if it is a black background with white writing, it will be hard for our customers to see, and the logo would just blend in. So we're trying to take the heritage of not just the Carter brand, but also the brand before Christian Walter had bought their building and they took over the spring sign, which was what their building was used for previously. This is the first time I've done anything like this, so I want to just thank everybody for your time today. It's been fascinating to watch you at work. But yes, I feel honoured to live here and to serve this city. So we would love to be able to keep our signs the way they are.
Thank you. Appreciate it. We couldn't tell that you're not a Southerner. Welcome. Yes, please.
Hi.
So you're with the applicant?
I am with him.
Okay, great.
I'm Angela White. I've worked for Carter Vintage since 2017. I work under both owners. Love my job, love everything about it. As he said, our logo and our branding is everything. Familiarity is the most important thing we have. People all over the country, on television, they'll see our TV and they'll see our T-shirt and they'll leave comments on our Instagram. I saw this on Yellowstone, that sort of thing. We have had that. We put a lot of this particular logo on our merch. We sell a lot of merch. In fact, here's our magnet. And we have T-shirts, that sort of thing. I'm with him in that I agree that just the logo itself, which was developed by the original owners, who are native Nashvilleites. The logo with the way it was done, it's really going to get lost. It's going to be, in my opinion, muddy. We are already actually terrified to move this business across the street because, one, the entrance is in the back of the building. First, that's going to be something they see and say, oh, here it is. And then the other sign is on the other side that takes you down the alley to the front door. It's just, we're already going to lose a handful of sales. We worry that they not knowing exactly where we are, not seeing that is going to cause more problems. And we have so many sales. We are and employees that we're already afraid that we will lose. It's just always been, and it was across the street in front of a historical building. We hope that, I realize you don't make adjustments or anything like that, but I hope that maybe it could be considered that this is a very important brand in Nashville. It's known worldwide. We have consigners worldwide. We have customers worldwide. We have lots of people we pay that we go down, that their income goes down, employees, that sort of thing. And we are hoping that that familiarity is going to save us.
Very good. Thank you. Appreciate your comments. Okay, you'll have a few minutes in case we have any rebuttal. Open public hearing. Close public hearing. Can you, Melissa, point us to the guidelines that any requirement for that back black requirement?
Living in an age where we don't print out everything anymore, so.
While she's pulling that up, I just want to say that when you look at the rendering of the front of the buildings with the signs on there, I do think that even though 3 feet by 6 feet seems to be a large sign, when you put it up 20 feet up in the air on a busy street, I can't really read what it says on the drawing, on the rendering that we see. And so I think that that having something lower in conformance with the guidelines will actually be much more visible than it would be 20 feet up in the air. So I think bringing it down to the guidelines recommended below those windows would be appropriate for this. She'll pull up the information for that.
So for the cabinet sign, it's section 7C 5D, and that states, for cabinet signs, the background must be opaque. Only graphics, text, and logos may be illuminated, and a halo of 1 inch around graphics, text, and logos may be non-opaque.
I don't understand how white is not opaque.
As far as it's been our experience that when you do have a white background, and it is illuminated, that the illumination it expands beyond that 1 inch.
But where's the 1 inch?
It says here, and a halo of 1 inch around graphics, text, and logos may be non-opaque.
I guess I'm not clear on the language on this. It doesn't make sense to me, because the background, a white opaque background is opaque, and it's going to have cabinet walls around it, so it's not going to be a halo on the outside of the sign. I guess I just don't understand.
I mean, that's the guidance that we've worked on previously. We're happy to have clarification moving forward.
I'm persuaded by the applicants here. I think that the brand is very well established. I've been one of the 400 to come in to your establishment before, and I just don't think, I don't know that, it's not clear from the language of the guidelines that this particular color scheme and established brand.
So it's not clear, it's opaque, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's not. Opaque means you can't see through it.
Points.
So I guess I'm as well confused, because if you did have a halo around this is such a busy design that I'm not sure that would increase the visibility. So if it is opaque, then, it could be a not internally illuminated sign. And I guess I think it would be worthwhile pursuing to see if there was external illumination that could be done on the sign that would be in compliance with the guidelines, as opposed to looking at an internally illuminated sign. Because that would, like I said, if it was opaque and there wasn't any internal illumination, then it would preserve what they're asking for, and comply with the guidelines as well.
If, I think I may be able to add a little color to making it more opaque, less clear. Oh, no, wait, the other way around. Robin, correct me if I'm wrong. So I think this guideline was written with an eye towards sign quality. And I'm not making a commentary on a logo or this applicant's sign, but that signage previously that was viewed as undesirable or less desirable was, I'm going to build a box. I'm going to throw, and technology has come some ways since this, but what we don't want to see is a cabinet of maximum size with, the old strip bulbs in it, and somebody has come and just pressed out a poor quality sign that you flip it on and it just broadcasts the light. I think that was viewed as undesirable. Of course, now if you were to find one of those in an antique shop, what's old is new again, and probably would be very cool and desirable to have in a bar in your house or in your bar in retro, whatever. So that you asked a question, and I guess I'm trying to field a little bit of a response to it. It's not a commentary on this applicant's sign as much as it is, why would this be written in the way that it's written? And that would be my explanation. And I do think a sign that is not a cabinet sign that had, gooseneck or something like that on it would completely preserve the logo and hopefully achieve the same thing in being down a level below the second floor. While I'm understanding of and slightly deferential to the existing painted sign on the building, I think for this applicant's purposes, it would be a preferred location for visibility.
And the guidelines do specifically state that a wall sign can be externally illuminated, so.
Melissa, I have a question about the common sign plan. I understand what the end goal of that is, but in this case, how would you actually get there? I assume the property owner would need to be here at the table to discuss that?
Right, yeah, and that's why it's not listed in the conditions. And actually, since this staff recommendation has been published, there's been another sign request, which will not need to come before you. Yeah, it would be great to have a common signage plan so that the signage for this building would be planned out in advance, take into account the different tenants, sign locations, but it's,
But we're not requiring it of this applicant. at
right,
this point.
it's hard, yeah, it's difficult to get the right people at the table at the right time, and it's kind of,
Right.
already had a number of sign permits issued, so.
And just as a reminder, we didn't write these guidelines, they're part of the DTC. But they are now your guidelines, and so up to you to interpret as you will.
I was part of that so.
No wonder
That's
they're
why-
no wonder they're subpar.
That's right.
Guidelines.
That's why they're opaque and not clear.
Yep.
Clear.
Any other comments?
I'll take a stab at a motion. How about that? With respect to 606 8th Avenue South, I move for approval with staff conditions and opening the door for continued discussions with the staff on illumination of this sign, either external or other ways that conform to the design guidelines.
The motion is heard.
May I suggest one addition?
Sure.
Additional conversations with staff in order to preserve the original trademark brand of the applicants.
Yep, that's good. I like that. Does that work, Robin?
You want to read it back to us?
It does leave it a little open-ended on our end. Are you saying that if they want to continue with the cabinet sign, this original condition is still a part of it, that it needs to be dark? Are you saying it doesn't need to be, or?
It doesn't say it needs to be dark. It says it has to be opaque.
Right, so how are you interpreting opaque? Is white okay?
Light won't come through it. So if there is, on the white portion, if there is any light coming through, it's only within the 1 inch halo.
So really, you're just taking out condition 3? Would that be right?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You're right. Yep, that's right.
Commissioner Smith.
That's what I was going to say, maybe we just approve recommendation omitting.
Omitting number 3. Okay. Okay. We got to make our motions first, and then we can.
Can I ask one question? Is that the only item that you have a, say, objection to, or are you happy with items 1 and 2?
Yeah, happy with items 1.
Okay.
Okay. Are you all okay? We can have comment after we finish the motion. Okay, so Vice Chair has made the motion. I think Robin is good with the languaging. We're removing number 3, and also to continue working with the applicant on illumination. And again, okay, there's a motion. Is there a second? Okay, second by Commissioner Price. All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, 1 opposed. Commissioner Mosley has opposed. Okay, but I think, okay.
It is still opaque.
And I think we still have quorum on that. So that motion passes. So thank you. Thank you, applicant, for your time as well.
All right. Next application is for 2037 Elliott Avenue. The house at 2037 Elliott Avenue was constructed circa 1935 and contributes to the historic character of the Waverly Belmont neighborhood conservation zoning overlay. The commission approved a rear addition to this house back in October last year. So on the lot, there are currently 2 single-story outbuildings. One serves as a cottage, which I've noted on the plan, or on the aerial photo. And then there is a garage. The existing garage is located within the 5-foot setback and does not have adequate foundation, which staff observed in the field. At the beginning of February this year, staff administratively permitted demolition of the existing garage and construction of a new carport, which is the site plan and elevations are seen here. As permitted, the new outbuilding would have the same footprint as the existing garage that is to be demolished and located in the same general area, but meeting that 5-foot setback. So now the applicant proposes to revise that permit to allow for a fully enclosed outbuilding with an increased footprint. The revised outbuilding can meet all design guidelines except for footprint. So the lot area is approximately 8,500 square feet. So the maximum footprint for all outbuildings on the lot is 1,000 square feet. The two existing outbuildings on the lot together have a footprint of approximately 1,035 square feet. So with that previous complete application with the carport, the footprint of the carport was proposed to be the same as what was there before, so the 1,035 square feet. So given that there was no change to the overall existing footprint, the scale of the carport was the same as the outbuilding that was previously there, staff permitted that carport. So the applicant now requests to increase the footprint of the new outbuilding by 105 square feet, which doesn't seem much, but the total footprint of outbuildings on this lot already exceeds the 1,000 square feet. So adding this 105 square feet increases the outbuilding footprint from 1,035 square feet to 1,140 square feet. So given that the increase in footprint further increases the degree to which the lot exceeds the maximum outbuilding footprint of 1,000 square feet, staff finds this revision does not meet Section 8B1 of the design guidelines and would not recommend approval of increasing the building footprint further. So staff recommends approval of the outbuilding with the following conditions: that the footprint of all outbuildings on the lot shall not exceed the current existing footprint of 1,035 square feet, and that materials be approved prior to purchase and installation.
Thank you, Melissa. Sure. Any questions? Okay. Applicant?
Good evening. Michael Ward, Allard Ward Architects, 1618 16th Avenue South. Thanks, Melissa. You summed it up really, really well. And thanks for meeting us out there, because it's definitely something you want to see in person. So we sort of, I think, toyed with and looked at what that 450 square foot garage would look like. And I think the owner spent the weekend sort of imagining how 2 cars would fit in there and imagining how a kid would get in and out of a car, and realized it's a 1-car garage. And that may be what they ultimately end up doing. But I think the thing that's a little bit interesting about this is, and I think we came up with I think 17,000 square feet for the lot. It's like a double the size of a lot over there. So it's a really big lot. But the thing that's really interesting about this lot, this house and the house next door, both have historic outbuildings in the back. These little cottages are original, and his is particularly nice. It's been expanded substantially from when it was built. He didn't do the expansions, but I'm sure it started out as probably a little 300 square foot sort of shed kind of cottage. It now has a porch around it. Someone tacked a room on the back probably 50 years ago, so it's substantially larger than it was originally. And basically our 2 options are build a 450 square foot carport, or literally tear down this building, and then we can build 1,000 square feet, nice 3-car garage with a room above it and all the stuff that I think he would ultimately like to have. And that's kind of where he is right now on the project. So to be able to build 550 square feet, which is still not a giant 2-car garage, I think would allow us to keep the cottage in place. We're not asking for 2-story. We're going to keep the height exactly at where the 450 version of it was. But it's really just a question for you guys. It's sort of, those are our 2 options at this point. Destroy the historic cottage and build a full-size, what we're allowed, or build a 450 square feet, which I don't think they're ultimately going to do. So, thank you.
Open public hearing. Close public hearing.
Is question for staff. Is the cottage a protected or historic structure? Is the cottage protected or a historic structure? Or has it been amended so much so that it wouldn't make that claim?
Yeah, there have been extensive additions to it. I was pulling up where we dated it.
That's just a little bit of a technical question. I'm just curious.
I mean, it seems like there had been additions to the side as well as the front, the portion that faces the rear of the house. So like it's been altered extensively. Based on the Sanborn maps, yeah.
So basically, the difference is 140 more square feet, right? 105.
105.
You know, normally we would say we want to get as close back to compliance as we normally do. I just want to remind ourselves that we do that sometimes. So, but there must be a little bit of leniency here to go to the 1,035.
Well, is the size of the lot that was pointed out? I think it's worthy of our at least discussion if that provides room for something a little more. You know, if you just jam the alley right back up to the existing garage, it probably is a bit different discussion. For me, it is that the guidelines are what they are, and we're here for just this reason. So.
That was my question too. I mean, it's a ginormous lot. I live a block away and would kill to have this lot size. But yeah, does that affect our decision at all? It's a big lot.
It's a big lot, but it's got a lot of coverage on it already.
It does.
And again, in other recent cases where there have been multiple outbuildings, we've tried to hew close to what the guidelines say in terms of maximum coverage. This lot's already over, which we're going to allow, grandfathered in, but to allow even more on top of it, I think goes beyond what we ought to do.
Any other? Yep.
With that, I'd be happy to make a motion. Go.
You know, I'm torn about this when I look at the site plan of it, and yes, there are a number of buildings there. Future pool, I can't put that into my equation at this point in time. That's not part of this decision making. You know, but with the ampleness of the front yard, the rear yard, and regaining that 5-foot setback on the side, to me, helps out. I do struggle with trying to put in a garage that's too small. And I looked at it to see if you could make it wide enough and it's not deep enough for many cars that you'd have these days. So, you know, I sort of hate to force this issue over 105 square feet, but I understand and respect your position on this as well. So, be interested in other people's comments as well, thoughts.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Any other thoughts?
I think I tend to agree with Commissioner Stewart. I mean, yes, we are going over, but there's some extenuating circumstances, I think, in my opinion.
I think we need to clarify the extenuating circumstances so that we, in the future, when we come on these kind of projects, that we can carry ourselves proud to say we made the right decision. I just want to encourage our commissioners to do that because we, you know, continue to get these. Everyone wants to continue to expand, especially Hillsborough, you know, Waverly, Belmont. So we just need to be, you know, thoughtful about how we do say, okay, this is good, but.
Could I just clarify something that he was saying, that if we turn this down, that he could tear it down and build something bigger?
The cottage.
You could tear the cottage down and build a bigger garage.
Oh, I see.
Because it would reduce the overall.
Okay. Michael is raising his hand. Would you like to hear him?
Sure.
Sure.
Melissa, do you not have any pictures of the little cottage?
It's adorable. I'm just going to be honest with you. Now, it's got some siding on it that's not original, but the form is original. The original chimney, not the fireplace, the wood stove chimney sits in the middle of it. I'm shocked he would want to tear it down. It's adorable. I think it rents really well. It literally was the center rectangle. It has the original roof. There's a lean-to on the back where a bedroom was added to it, and then the little part that's like a little finger that sticks out was where a bathroom was added. And then that little L is just a little lean-to porch that was put on the side. And it has, because he has a front drive and there's no rear drive, I think the tenant can park back there on gravel, all that's lawn.
Mm-hmm.
So I would hate to see it come down. The little one, you can see the little structure right above it is the one that sort of matches next door. But we have torn down and destroyed things that were far less preserved than that little cottage. I wish we had pictures of it. If I'd known it was going to be that big of a deal, I'd brought him. But I do think it's nice. I feel like if he can get a garage where he can park 2 cars and not have it open to the elements, I think that gets preserved forever because it really kind of locks it in place. And I know it's not protected, but it is kind of interesting that it's there. And like I said, we'll live one way or the other, but I hate for him to have to go to that option to get a real family-sized 2-car garage.
I suppose given that the garage is 1 story and they're not asking for a dadu above it also, I could be persuaded by what Commissioner Stewart has proposed.
I think that's probably a good point. I'm torn like the rest of y'all, because I think it's fairly clear maximum 1 lot is 1,000 feet. That being said, if this was 2 lots, you'd have 1,750. It's got enough square footage for that. And I think if you do tear the cottage down, you can, by right, build a 2-story dadu. I think they're trying to compromise. It's my first day, so I'm not sure exactly how that works.
I'm going to give you a star today.
And I'd just like to say, it's funny to me, we said, well, we're already going over a little bit. Do we want to go over this amount? But I go back to we're already going over a little bit. So if we're going to go over, let's do it in a way that makes sense. I don't know. This is a tough one. Yeah, I've seen this. I walk by this house all the time, and I've maybe possibly snuck down behind it and seen this cottage. I'd hate to lose this cottage. So I don't know. I know that's not on us. We can't predict what a homeowner will or will not do based off our decision,
But it is part of the square footage.
It is part of the square footage.
So, we go into those niggly details, but I think it's good for, public hearing to hear how we debate and deliberate these things, because if somebody else comes back and says, oh, well, you all did this and we had that come before us so many times, that way, again, if we do this, we need to say clearly why we did it.
I think I'll take a stab at that.
Okay.
And this is something that Commissioner Stewart has said in the past. I'll try to replicate that while we do have these guidelines before us and we strive to take them at their word, we do have the ability as a commission to make exceptions when there are other situations or extenuating circumstances with particular properties. And because this has a cottage that could be argued is a historic resource on and previously existing on the back part of the property, and because the proposed enlargement of the garage is modest at 100 and something feet, and overall allows the property owner to preserve the existing cottage, that in this case we can make an exception that will not necessarily carry over or be precedent setting for other projects where people are building from scratch everything and exceeding the allowed allotment. Does that make sense?
Okay. Commissioner Price has made the motion. Vice Chair Stewart has seconded the motion. All in favor of the motion? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Would you like to comment, Commissioner Mosley? Oh, you could still comment.
I think having that it is one story, which was mentioned, which would, if it were proposed as two-story now or in the future, that would be a different subject altogether, and on and on. But I take no exception to the approval of the project. I just wanted to make sure we put the appropriate brackets around it.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And also, it's not on our purview and it's not really part of the deliberation, but I am encouraged that this might allow continued affordable housing unit to be in existence. So,
Thank you, Vice Chair. All right. Good comments. Good discussion. Thank you.
The next case is 808 Powers Avenue. The applicant proposes new infill for the lot at 808 Powers. The house at 808 Powers Avenue was a circa 1952 1.5 story side gable bungalow. Due to extreme deterioration and changes that had been made to the house over time, the MHZC found that the house no longer contributed to the overlay and approved demolition in April of 2023. In September of 2023, the MHZC denied an infill proposal for the lot, finding that the proposal did not meet the design guidelines for the Eastwood Neighborhood Conservation Zoning Overlay. The applicant has since revised the proposal and requests approval of the revised infill proposal. The immediate historic context surrounding 808 Powers Avenue is composed of modest 1 to 1.5 story houses. The house at 808 Powers Avenue was also 1.5 stories, and none of the contributing houses surrounding the site exceed 1.5 stories. In this slide, some context images. The top image there, the original house at 808 Powers is to the far left, and then those are all contributing 1 to 1.5 story houses to the right. And then there in the bottom image, 808 Powers is in the dead center. That's non-contributing infill to the far left of the screen, and then contributing 1.5 story houses on either side there. The proposed infill meets all base zoning setbacks. The proposed side setbacks continue the rhythm of spacing for this block face. The proposed infill has a 1.5 story form. Staff finds that the foundation height, ridge height, eave height, and width, combined with the overall form, make the proposal compatible with the historic context. This is a streetscape that the applicant provided. The top image in this slide is the new proposal in relation to the context, and then the bottom image is what was there in relation to the context. Staff finds that the proposed infill meets the design guidelines for materials, orientation, form, roof form, siding and building type, setbacks, parking and vehicular storage, and proportion and rhythm of openings. The infill also includes a front-facing basement-level entry below the front porch stairs. Staff finds that the secondary front entrance to the basement meets the design guidelines because it is discreetly located below the front stairs, where it is minimally visible from the street, and therefore will not be mistaken as a primary entrance. Because of the grade, other homes have front-loading basement-level garages. Although these do not appear to be historic conditions, their existence does make the basement door more compatible than it would be otherwise. So staff recommends approval of the proposed infill with the conditions there on the screen, and those are just standard conditions, so I won't read through those. But with those conditions, staff finds that it meets the guidelines. Happy to answer questions, and the applicant is here as well.
Thank you, Joseph. Applicant?
Thank you all. My name is Chris Nunn. I'm an architect with Strickland Architecture, and just want to thank all of you for your time in considering this. I want to thank Joseph and the other staff for the amount of time they put into helping us get to a solution that works for everybody. We appreciate it very much.
You're in agreement with all the staff recommendation?
We are. Thank you.
Yay.
Quick clue.
Thank you.
quick
Yeah, sure.
clarifying question to you there. It's a challenge to, the lower and the upper entry, and, you've got endless railing to be maintained there, which is, I'm not suggesting it doesn't deserve a railing. Have you investigated, I'm not interested in spending your money in retaining walls because you've got to solve that problem, but have you investigated means by which you could access the downstairs and not purchase a whole front yard's worth of railing? Because you have to have it so you don't fall in, but I just was curious. It would be preferable, but also not a requirement. Point of discussion.
The challenge we have is that the street sits significantly lower than the ground floor. Sure. And because of the conditions of having the front porch elevation, the ground floor elevation, or the main floor elevation match the existing adjacent, we're really challenged. The client really wants to have an accessible entrance to the basement. They have living units down there, and so without going up and then having, switchbacks to get back down, this seemed to be the most reasonable solution. Sure. And considering that there is a front driveway there now, we're significantly reducing that context, and I think it sounds like staff is happy with it.
No, I'm happy with it too. I mean, an accessible entrance is definitely
I don't love having a ton of railing, but
yeah, I just didn't know if there was another suggestion. Certainly, we'd be open to it.
I'd love it if there was one.
Yeah, and perhaps part of it being there's not a requirement to remove the front entrance. So if you kept the retaining situation as it exists for the drive, could that work?
I'm not opposed to that.
Yeah.
I'm happy with our approval. I'm not trying to stir up anything else.
I understand. Is that something that was not viewed as desirable, or
Keeping the front drive, is that?
Yeah, as an accessible means of entry.
So there were some earlier schemes where the front drive was there. The existing house has a front drive that ends at a garage door.
Mm-hmm.
And we found the front loading garage not to be appropriate because that wasn't a historic condition here. And so removing that garage then created kind of a front yard parking situation by still having the curve cut and the driveway with no garage.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the issue there. We found that removing the curb cut and the driveway was the best solution. So a front yard parking pad wasn't created since the garage is being removed. And so that's what led to this proposal today.
Got it. There are other solutions to that, but you've added some context to it. I'll stop talking now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Open public hearing? Anybody else? You're the last four people here. Close public hearing. Okay? Is there a motion?
First, I'd just like to thank the applicants for working with staff. It was difficult for us to turn down your initial application, but I think as we all said, we support the Park Center's mission, and thank you for finding a solution that works for everybody, so sincerely. With that, I'd be happy to make a motion. With regard to 808 Powers Avenue, I move for approval of the staff recommendation.
Motion?
Second.
Second by Commissioner Cotton. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, that passes. Thank you again. Appreciate it.
Next up is a revision to the tax exemption. Give me just 1 second. So there's several different little minor things we'd like to update. The main one is moving the application deadline to monthly instead of every year annually, because that doesn't align with everyone's projects. So that everyone can have an opportunity to apply that qualifies, we'd like to move it to monthly. We'd like to just remove the sentence number 8. The exemption may be considered expired. Just the recommendation is to take that out completely. And then we changed the requirement for an affidavit. It was in the application requirement, but we don't want anyone filing a deed restriction before they've even been approved. So we've just moved that around so that it's out of the application requirement and is a requirement once it is approved, if it is approved. And we recommend approval.
So Robin, this is better admin efficiency?
Well, each one has a different reason for it. So changing the deadline is to make it more open to more applicants.
Okay.
Taking out the sentence about, that's in this draft, about the expiration is a recommendation from legal. And then changing the affidavit is because it doesn't make sense to have it as an application requirement.
Okay. Yeah. Any questions, Robin?
I think Ann might want to.
And just to clarify that, that sentence that's 8 was, it was not in it's not in the guidelines already. It's something that was put in this draft, but Robin and I conferred and I recommend she take it out.
Okay. Duly noted. All right. Motion?
Do we need a motion? I move for approval.
Vice Chair's made a motion to approve. Second by Commissioner Cotton. Yeah, one of the two, the other. All in favor of the motion? Okay. Any opposed? Seeing none, that motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And lastly, we recommend a revision to historic landmark signage. This will be a recommendation to planning and to council if you decide to do it. Right now, the qualification is that the sign be at least 50 years old, and we're recommending changing it to be more than 30 years old. Again, so that there's more opportunity for more signs to be landmarked and protected. It's kind of hard to date a sign. So, something could be 48 years old, but we don't know. And so this just makes it a little easier to do.
I like that too.
I think that's a great idea. I mean, there was a sign in Printer's Alley that I loved, wanted to save it, and George Groom says, that sign's only 25 years old. And so, anyway, so I think I welcome that.
Having more opportunities for others to have this landmark is great. So it's good for the city as well. So,
how does one nominate a sign for historical landmark?
It's the same type of designation process as any other type of overlay. So it might start with the community meeting, depending on what sign it is and where it is. But certainly the applicant would apply, or maybe a council member would apply. Then there'd be a public hearing with you, there'd be a public hearing with planning, and there'd be 3 readings with council, one of them being a public hearing.
That El Dorado sign in North Nashville qualifies.
They have committed to landmarking their sign. They've made that commitment. They're just waiting to move it, which does make sense because to landmark it, we kind of need to know where it is exactly. So once they have that moved back closer to its original location, we'll landmark it at that time.
do we have to have open public hearing?
I don't think there's anybody here.
But I mean, just for public.
Yes,
Yes, we do.
would.
Okay, did I do that for number 25? Okay, I didn't. Okay, so I'm going to do it for 26. So open public hearing.
Is there anybody in the
Close public hearing. And I think we've already made the decisions, right? Have we already?
We haven't made a motion.
Okay, oh, we haven't made a motion. I thought we did already.
Move for approval.
Move for approval. Second. All right, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? None, so this is getting recommended to council. All right.
Thanks, Robin.
Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you, staff, for hanging in there with us. Thank you, Commissioner Smith, for hanging in there in your first time. You get the star.
This has been a service of the Metro Nashville Network. If you would like to see this presentation again, or for more information on this and other programs, visit nashville.gov.